evening, ladies, gentlemen, and MBs. Welcome to Warui Deshou's second stream, and we're still covering Given, even though the show has now concluded. We thought I'd come back for an encore, as the band is often wont to do. But indeed, we have become a band today because we've actually got a guest star on the show. But I'm Shane, of course, and joining me as always, from across the pond but close to my heart, is the Subtle Doctor.
It is I, the unnecessary flat keytar solo that no one asked for.
Boo! Boo!
Well, the boo as well. I thought you did a good job. That was a good enough. Okay.
And that lovely voice you're hearing there is our very special guest star for today. Please give it up, of course, for Anthony Gramuglia from CBR.
Hi. What's up? I appreciate the applause. That's it's quite something there.
No, I cheated, by the way, and I actually copied your name from our previous Discord chat, including the phonetic spelling of it.
Oh yeah,
so that way I didn't cock it up.
No one pronounced it correctly. I've gotten the weirdest pronunciations in the world. At least you aren't like a lawyer who's trying to say it on like a live stream, who's like saying, "Hey," I don't know. Anyway, yes.
Live stream lawyers as of late have really been going down the pan. Am I right?
I mean, it's really hard to go downhill when you're already at that level already, so what are we gonna do? No, so as you've already stated, so as you said before, my name is Anthony. I write for sites like CBR, The Mary Sue. I've done work on Screen Rant before. I tweet obnoxiously on whatever topic falls under my nose that day. Yeah, and I've seen this anime Given, and I have feelings that are going to be interesting to share, I think.
Excellent. That's good to hear.
And don't forget the anime feminist you also write for, which is how I discovered your work and your Twitter, and kind of the reason we're doing this show today in a lot of ways is because of that wonderful little write-up you did on Go For It Nakamura, which I subsequently bought.
Yeah, it's good. Oh, I love that manga.
It's lovely. It's such a delight.
I think I saw some artist, because I follow a lot of artists on Twitter and stuff like that, like different Western comic art writers and artists who are inspired by manga, and I kept seeing people talk about this manga, Go For It, and I'm seeing pictures of it and thinking my first thoughts were, it looks like Ranma One Half, like a Rumiko Takahashi manga, and I was like, this is really cool. I like this, and I read it and I was like, this is up my alley entirely. I loved every second of it. No, yes, Anime Feminist also. It's another big writing credit of mine. I love that site. The editorial staff there are fantastic. They're very much like a hands-on, you'll send your work in and they'll be like, oh yeah, this is good. However, here's some really good suggestions that'll make it go from good to excellent. I just love those guys. Yeah,
that's excellent.
Yeah. No, they're great. I have nothing.
Shouts to Amelia and all the fam over there.
Indeed.
Nothing but kind things to say about those guys.
Good stuff. All right, so before we get into our discussions here, this episode is going to serve a couple of purposes. Myself, Anthony, and Doc are going to discuss the show as a whole now that it's concluded, because if you had listened to our previous episode when we saw out Song 2, the final episode of the show, we offered our thoughts on that episode, but we didn't actually discuss the show as a whole and our overall feelings on it. So this is what this episode is going to serve. We're also going to get Anthony's perspective on a couple of topics. We've got more Patron questions to answer as well, and we're going to talk about favourite moments as well. So there's going to be plenty to go along here, even though the show now has finished airing. But firstly, if I may just pass the baton over to Doc. Doc, can you actually tell us, this is something we normally do in our regular streams, but we haven't done this round. Can you tell us about the people who actually made Given?
Indeed. So this is a thing that we neglected to do on our sort of trimmed down,
we're bad.
Right, second stream podcast, because we're bad. But now that we are kind of talking about the fuller work as a whole, we thought it would be good to highlight the creatives involved. So as probably everyone knows, I think, that has been in the Given fandom, Given is based on a manga that is by mangaka Natsuki Kizu. And it's currently 5 volumes out, but it's still ongoing. It began in April of 2013. And the anime TV adaptation was directed by Hikaru Yamaguchi, who, when you look at Yamaguchi's CV, at least the one I have pulled up on Anime News Network, not a lot of directorial credits. In fact, apart from a very tiny sort of 2-episode OAV called Esha Kron, which I don't really know what that is, but apart from that, this is the first major directorial credit that Yamaguchi has. Yamaguchi's done storyboarding, some episode direction for Osamatsu-san, Classicaloid, some good shows, but now they are heading up this project and will also direct the upcoming Given 2020 film. And the head writer for the TV show, who will also write the film, is Yuniko Ayana, who has a much larger CV in terms of script writing and series composition, but not a lot that I have seen, actually. They've written some scripts for shows like Occult Academy, Little Busters, the sequel to Last Exile, Fam, The Silver Wing, the unfortunate sequel, I have to say.
I was going to say, any sequel to something beginning with the title The Last is inherently a lie.
I mean, Last Airbender.
It's true. That's an excellent point.
I mean, there is the Last Airbender sequel, which was, had moments, I guess.
No, of course.
Korra had moments, but mixed feelings on the second season there for that, but ended well. So yeah, I'm sorry, cut you off there. My bad.
Oh, no worries.
It's all good.
I know that there are some big Aikatsu fans in my timeline, and this person wrote some scripts for Aikatsu seasons 1 and 2. Yeah, there's a ton of stuff here, but a lot of it, again, has been kind of outside of my wheelhouse. Like, I'm not a Digimon person. I haven't watched, like, a lot of idol shows. And that seems to have been Ayana's bread and butter up until at least this point, right?
Which Digimon shows did you work on? Just to interrupt.
So, no worries. So, screenplay for 3 Digimon films, the Adventure Tri movies, Determination, Reunion, and Loss.
Okay. I can.
So I guess the newer iterations.
Yeah, they're like a newer. They're a newer one. I'm not like a huge Digimon fan, but I have friends who are very passionate about it. So I'm kind of like here by osmosis. I stopped following Digimon back after I think the 4th series back years ago, and it's never really like a casual interest, but never got into like it again as like a big thing.
You digivolved onto better things.
Oh, that's a bad. That one hurt. I'm sorry.
I apologize.
I'm going to pop my pills now just so I blood pressure after hearing
There's
that.
only one more person I want to shout out though before we move on to actually talking about the show, and I'll be remiss. I think we all would if we did not talk about Michiru, the lady who is responsible for the songs in the show. And it is, or actually the score. I apologize. Whenever the band is doing their concert on stage, and I believe their sort of jam session, those songs are actually by Sentimental. But the OST, which is kind of the more, I feel like, sedate's not the right word, but kind of the more warm and laid back acoustic guitar stuff. That is Michiru, and Michiru has done music for several other anime. I think Izetta the Last Witch is the one that I knew her from. Oh my
god!
The music in it was good, though. Music was good.
That's true. I'm sorry, but I just had like a gag reflex reminding myself of that, complete puff of air. Ugh.
I can hear the trauma in your voice already. I can hear you being like, I feel like you're going back in like old war flashbacks right now with.
How ironic, given the show was about a war.
That's fair.
Oh man, it wasn't as bad as all that. Shadon is
Get out.
overreacting.
Get out.
I think you're correct on this one.
Thank you. By the way, Adsti, we will be having a slot open up for a new co-host of Warui Deshou very soon. Would you be curious in joining?
Well, if you don't mind buying me a better mic, I'd certainly be fine with that.
It's all right. You can have Docs. He's going to be trading in
That's
soon,
right.
completely
That's
for
right.
unrelated reasons.
You know, I've been informed if you have estate sales after the passing of people, you can really get good prices on the clothing off
Interesting.
Clothing off their back sells well. You have any fillings, by the way? Those go quite well.
Man, I feel like this could be the start of a profitable relationship.
Wow. Does that make me the was it David Lee Roth that exited Van Halen, or was it Sammy Hagar? Whoever it was.
Oh God,
I'm the worst person to ask that question too.
If people started typing noises, that is not me going to Wikipedia. I promise you.
I don't remember names at all. I told you before we started that I literally had to bring up the character lists up just to make sure I get the names right, because I'll mispronounce names all the time. It's awful. If I don't have it like written out in front of me, I just stumble. So yeah, that's my memory in a nutshell, I guess.
You are our spiritual kin. On this show, we mispronounce names and forget shit.
Oh,
That's just what we do.
We're bad.
It's the worst. That's why I write half the time, because I know I can I can always check later. You know, typing, you can go back and fix anything up. With speech, once you say it, it's out there and that's it. So what I have to say on about Given, once I say it, I can't go back and like patch it up through editing or not. So
it's all right. I accept cash contributions. You know, since I'll be editing this shortly.
Oh, I mean, or your next of kin anyway.
That's true. All right. So I think that wraps up the show's credentials insofar as staff goes. Now, obviously, for those of you listening at home, myself and Doc, we've spoke hours on hours about the show, episode by episode, for 11 times, you know. So you're probably a bit bored to death of listening to us. So let's pass it over to our guest here. Anthony, can you give us your thoughts on Given, just in general for the moment? Then we'll move on to more specifics in a second.
Okay, I'm going to hold back on talking about my opinions on the show's pacing and plotting, because I feel we're going to go into that a bit more later on. My initial thoughts going in was that it looked very... when I looked at the early artwork and Twitter posts about it and heard you guys talking about it, I thought, and by the way, they know I have not told them anything about my thoughts deliberately because I want to see their reaction.
I'm waiting.
Okay, so initially I went in, I'm thinking, oh, this is kind of sweet and cute, you know, nothing too intense, you know, just guys hanging out, two bros, you know. And I'm going to be honest, the show was at its best when it was the character drama stuff. Was at its weakest when it was kind of spinning its wheels. I feel like Given would have been better as a movie than as a series, because I think even at 11 episodes, it kind of... And I'll go into more detail later about this. I feel that at 11 episodes, it was too long for its own good, for the story it was trying to tell. I think that my favorite character was like... What's his name? The long-haired guy with the goat, with the little stubble, and who's in charge.
That'd be Haruki, I believe.
Haruki. Yeah, he was my favorite character by far. I thought his story was I felt the most emotional for him. You know, the whole unrequited love thing going on. You know, from him being all like, oh, you know, hey, my bandmate's kind of cool. He's a little scary looking, but kind of want him. Although that being said, when he's like, when your friend's passed out on your couch, the worst decision is to take your phone out and be like, maybe if I take a photo of him while he's snoring drunk.
Yeah.
That was where it got me a little like, okay, that's a little off. I feel like, although, and this is the part that I think is going to get me, the most criticism, I did not really get Mafuyu until like 2/3 of the way through the series. Until that point, I was kind of like, he kind of felt like a manic pixie dream boy, I guess. For a little bit at first, you know, here's this main character, you know, Ritsuka, I can never pronounce his last name. Unayama.
Yeah.
Unayama.
Oh, I think it's Uechi, actually, if you go by what they say often in the show.
That's fair.
Oh, then the little nickname, right?
Okay, so like Ritsuka, he's, you know, a bad place, he's having a rough time, and I really liked at first how the interaction was helping his character arc out. Like, I loved how his discussion, his talking, his relationship, him, you know, fixing up guitar strings and bring him on the band and always being like a blushy mess around this guy. I liked how that was building up his character. But then I think it really hit around like episode 5, this problem started to come up. I feel like his arc ended on episode 5. Right when he learns about like Mafuyu, how Mafuyu's older boyfriend killed himself. Yuki, right? Yuki, yeah,
correct.
So.
Mm-hmm.
Once that happens, I don't think his character really develops beyond that point. I feel like at that point, the story moves away from him and becomes more about Mafuyu, but it reveals stuff slowly. We get hints here and bits there, and I don't think until episode 8 that I really started to like Mafuyu as a character, because before that he was kind of like a blank slate. And one thing about like queer fiction in general, there's a lot of tropes that have become tired in mainstream romance and mainstream fiction. The Manic Pixie Dream Girl being one of them, but a lot of people are of a school of thought where they say, it's tired in this, but it's never been done through a queer lens before. It's never been done with male and male. And because of that, there's a lot of forgiveness towards certain overused tropes and cliches if they're being used for a new relationship. So if this was, and that's why I'm trying to rationalize my head, because on one hand I did like this quite a lot. I think it worked really well. I think the romance worked really well, especially towards the beginning, bits in the middle, and especially at the end. The last 3 episodes were really solid. I have thoughts on the plotting, but I think the romance aspect was really well done there. I think between the point where they fight right before the concert, they have to get into a little argument, and to the very end of the series, I think the romance is handled really well. I think that's the best it's handled, honestly. But I feel that the tropiness of the relationship, I'm not sure if it brings the show down at all in any way, because from a writing standpoint, it is an overused cliche, but it's not done too frequently with LGBTQ characters.
Yeah.
Which is
I mean...
Yeah. I'm sorry, yeah, go for it.
So go on.
No, I have nothing to say. I was just babbling. Go for it.
Well, I see where you're coming from with that, Anthony, because I think that from my perspective, like looking back at the show as a whole, I'm wondering if the issue is not necessarily in Matthew's betrayal throughout the episodes up until the point in which we learn his backstory, but rather the connective tissue that needs to be there to get from how he was in the flashbacks with Yuki, where he was obviously a lot more expressive. He was a bit more extroverted. He had good quips and good banter going, and then he obviously suffered trauma as a result of that incident, and then regressed or like came back into himself, became more inward. I'm wondering if that might be the fault of the writing, therefore, rather than the fact that he simply is, as you say, a manic pixie dream boy. Because I think that, like, the thing about tropes and cliches to me, like, I certainly have seen a lot of them where they are tired and boring and shit and awful, and I just don't care for them. But there are times when so go on.
No, I was going to interrupt you and say, tropes aren't inherently bad. It's just how they're used so often, I think.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, especially if there's no like real innovation to them or anything that makes them distinct from like every other character. Like, I think that if it gets to the point where you have a character who can be defined by tropes, and you could literally take them out of one show or work and put them into another, and you wouldn't really notice the difference, that's when it's an issue.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's also to stick up for tropes, if I may here.
No, I'm a fan of tropes. Go for it. I love tropes. We have a job without tropes.
Or indeed, right, for sure. I feel like also like so oftentimes like we kind of when we podcast about anime, we're kind of analyzing it strictly as a piece of art, but I do think that there are some tropey anime. This is true for a lot of different media, books, games, whatever, that essentially are tropes, but they're not sort of toxic or harmful ones. And just as kind of on the level of a product, I think those can be fine and can serve people's needs, though that doesn't make them, good art necessarily. But yeah, no, I just wanted to slot that in there in favor of tropey works of fiction.
Oh yeah.
So to go back to what I was saying, I think that, like, is it more the case that there just isn't enough, like, connective tissue between Matthew's, like, to flesh out essentially the decline of Matthew as a person from when he was with Yuki to the point in which we first meet him in the show, and then his gradual return to, as Doc described it in the previous episode, a kind of synthesis of those experiences plus returning to a part of his old self?
I think the big issue with Matthew is they need to be more done with them. Like, I think more individual small moments.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of stories, the best moments are the tiny small ones. Like,
yes.
I'll give you an example. I've just been showing my partner Neon Genesis Evangelion, and I'm going to get to Eva again in a bit because there's something else, especially in episode I think 5 or 6, that like struck me as a big fan of Evangelion.
Speak my language, buddy.
Oh, I love that series so much. But no, so in Eva, there is a lot of the same ideas. The character of Shinji, for example, is very melancholic, very insular, very shy. But there are tiny moments that say a great deal. And I feel like Given's big problem from a writing standpoint was it had the big ideas. The big ideas it's trying to get across, it's got them. You know, the big emotional moments, it hits them head on. Especially true with, again, the beginning, and I think the end really did that well. The problem is building to those moments, they feel stronger if there's all these tinier bits too. So a good example.
Yeah, I'm struggling to think of too many of those beyond when Mafuyu and Uenoyama go shopping for the guitar pedals.
Mm-hmm. That was one of the best. I love that scene.
Yeah, I thought that episode was strong in that department, but after that, I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of struggling to think of the smaller moments. Maybe those got swallowed up in the montages that they kind of leaned on from time to time.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I really liked Furuki's character. That was the band leader, right? Band leader? Yeah. I loved him because he had so much vibrancy. And I gotta say right now, I just had to recently review for CBR the live action Tokyo Ghoul movies, which take place. I'm not a particularly big Tokyo Ghoul fan myself, but the reason I bring it up is because they have these beautiful looking cafes where they make the coffee in front of you with like little setup there, and they pour the water into the
artisanal, yeah.
So while watching Given with that beautiful cafe, I had to drink coffee. I think my blood, if you took a sample of my blood, is literally just caffeine. I think you can find whole beans just floating out my bloodstream at this point. It's really terrible. I love
Doctor,
it.
he's type N for Nescafe.
I love it. Oh my god. That coffee is like food porn for me. I just adore it. It's also one of the reasons why Yuri on Ice was such an agonizingly wonderful experience because every episode they had like little food in like the middle commercial break section, and every time I saw that I was like, well, now I gotta make that food, now I gotta cook that, now I gotta cook that, now I gotta cook. It was awful. It was the worst.
My wife has this affliction also. Like every time we watch, I feel like Japanese anything. I mean, we were watching. You brought this up in Discord the other day, Anthony. Uh-huh. We were watching GMK actually.
Oh my god, it's so good!
And it's really good. And there's a scene where people are in like a restaurant or bar and they're eating noodles. And Annie, my wife, was like, "Even here, even here in a Godzilla movie, now I have to go eat these noodles."
Yeah, oh my god, I freaking love it.
I need Japanese anything, and she sees the food, and we must eat Asian food. Subsequently.
No, it's bad when I going back to Yuri on Ice for a second, when I watched it with my partner, the next day we got Katsudan. Like we stalked the rest, the menus online of Japanese places nearby, and we just what's this pork thing? I'll have that. Trying to pretend we don't know what we're getting, but we totally know what we're getting. And it's even worse. It's even worse now. They have like a Victor like keychain on my key set, so it'll be like, what's this Katsudan thing? You take that keys out, and it's like, oh,
he knows.
And they just get these weird looks from the staff because they know that you're a complete nerd and you just went to a Japanese restaurant because you. Okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop myself now. I mean,
That's fair. Hey, you can't go wrong with good food one way or the other.
no. I mean, no. I mean, I'm right now. I'm recording in a closet, and the knowledge that I'm not going to be anywhere near food unless I come out of the closet and go get food is just a troubling experience.
Yikes!
Be starved in this closet. That's why you should never stay in closets. It's bad. It's bad.
Always bad. Always bad.
No.
Can I
duly noted.
Can I take a moment to agree with something you said? I think right at the start, Anthony, was that Given's length. I do think that for the goals that the show clearly had, it was too long by a bit. Which is curious because I feel that there are enough characters if the adaptation, if the folks that we talked about at the top of the show doing the adaptation were more kind of at liberty to be adventurous, they could have used the time that it felt like the show was indeed spinning its wheels with the four boys to flesh out the ladies or bring some adults in or kind of give us more of the tertiary characters. The cast, the ensemble cast was quite large for a show of this type and this length. And but yet and still it feels too long because the focus is squarely on the two leads primarily and secondarily on Akihiko and Haruki.
Exactly.
And so it's sort of a curious kind of final product in that way.
Yeah. I think that as... Oh, sorry, go on.
No. It can wait.
Okay. For me, like, knowing this is a manga, like, I think that I mean, we've covered like shows that have been adapted from manga before, where you can sort of see the seams in places or of like where this is a big deal in the manga, but the manga doesn't have the same restriction format wise as television does, where it has to fit that particular like 11 or 12 episode timeline. Because arguably, Given's best moment, and I think that we can probably all agree on this, is of course when Matthew sings and performs for the band in episode 9. And I have to wonder if just merely by, like in an alternate version of this work, merely by making that the final moment of the show, like closing out on that, would it have been more powerful, I wonder? Because I've said before... Yeah, because I've said before, like, about how me and Doc have talked shop about shows like Erased or Violet Evergarden, where they're like big narrative thrusts, the thing that drives them forward. They kind of end around the same point, episode number-wise, as Given does. Violet, you know, having her closure with her former commanding officer in, like, I think it was episode 8, and similarly in Erased, when Hinazaki is saved in episode 8. It seems to be episode 8 curse, I don't know. And after that point, those two shows were still good, don't get me wrong, but the thing that, like, the throughput, like, the lifeblood that went through all the way through it just kind of stopped. And Given half suffers from that, in my opinion, because unlike with Erased and Violet Evergarden, there was still... It felt like the show had shifted gears onto a new plot thread, which Haruki lays out, which is public versus private performance. Like, you can't be doing this in public, you know, which... Which for you know, two gay men like freshly in love with each other and freshly, well, at least for one of them, like freshly aware of their own sexuality, must be quite suffocating.
Well, beyond just that, also the Japanese pop industry is. Have you ever looked up the contracts that J-pop people have to sign, like the idols?
Idol stuff is awful. Like, you can't have boyfriends and stuff, otherwise you will be like forced to do public apologies. Yeah. You'll be prostrated before people, like, made an example of.
I forget who it was, but there was a pop idol recently who was, I think, a fan doxed her online and posted her information. And I think that's what it was. I might be getting part of the story wrong. If I am, someone in the comments will happily correct me, I'm sure, without any animosity. But she was doxed and was actually assaulted on her property by I think a fan. And not only did she have to issue an apology, but then she was let go by her agency because they, I think, thought she was like either like damaged goods, I think was the term I was seeing online. It was gross. And it's disgusting.
The tearing down of that divide, yeah.
And if you add to that to the whole lifestyle of a queer lifestyle, if someone is this actually goes into something that has nothing to do with anime whatsoever, but it does have to do with another topic I love, horror. There's a really interesting documentary going around about the making of the second Nightmare on Elm Street film. This will make sense in a few seconds, so bear with me for a second.
No, go right ahead.
The film is often criticized. I think there's a Cracked.com article that called it the gayest horror film ever made. So it has a little bit of tongue-in-cheek reputation, but over time became like a cult classic. But the lead actor, who was gay, he was essentially like blacklisted after releasing it because he couldn't escape the connection with a gay movie in the 80s during the beginning of the AIDS crisis.
Yeah.
And the documentary, I won't say anything for those who haven't seen it yet, but he goes to like the writers and directors and asks like, what were you guys thinking? Did you know what was happening to me as a result of this film being so this way? It's interesting. If you get a chance to watch it, it'll probably be on streaming sometime before the 8 years over, I've been hearing people say. But it's quite good. Anyway, what I bring up is that with a band, like the band in Given, which I believe is called Given by the end of the series, is that...
Correct.
That was correct.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I misinterpreted that or not. I wasn't sure if we're going from seasons to Given. Okay. But with a band like that in a country that's... Now, Japan is obviously not, as homophobic as many people say it is. Obviously, there's a huge community and an uprising, a social movement. I would compare it to America during the 80s, during the movie I just gave an example of, essentially. And, if you're exposed like that, it's going to reflect on public opinion. It's going to reflect on how everyone perceives the band, and that could be to its benefit or to its detriment, depending on how you handle that criticism, how you handle that feedback. So,
indeed,
yeah. So you got the whole idea of the J-pop relationship aspect, and you also got the, exposing your entire band to criticism you'll receive because of your orientation, stuff outside your control. So it's I feel that idea would be interesting to explore in the movie or in future entries, but of the series, whatever may come. But I almost feel like that's not a priority for it. And I feel like maybe it shouldn't be a priority for it, because a lot of media deals with the pain of, individuals, who are exposed, who are judged for who they are. It's very problematic and it's a dangerous trend in fiction to just exploit the pain of minorities for the sake of drama. That's not it's not a thing I personally like to see too often, unless it's done by a master of the craft who knows what he's doing or she's doing or they're doing.
Yeah, I think like absolute kind of best case scenario is that perhaps the writer sort of in a meta and sort of maybe subtle way, by showing this band Given that has this problem in a work of fiction and having that work of fiction become popular. Maybe that sort of is a roundabout way of criticizing this whole idea that you're talking about, the stigma, while not sort of in the text of the work exploiting the characters and doing all that sort of thing that you mentioned. I don't know if that's what is happening. In an ideal world, I would like to think that was going on, but as you say, like it doesn't seem like necessarily an aim of the show.
No, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you and I, Doc, we had very strong feelings towards episode 8, which were somewhat quelled following that.
So
although I still have... Oh, sorry, go on.
I have one question about episode 8, actually. Because I didn't actually listen. I deliberately tried to avoid listening to your opinions on it, because I didn't want to have them color my read of it. I'll probably go back and watch the episode 8 after this, but... did they just kind of gloss over the fact that Mafuyu's father is abusive?
Yeah.
Yeah, they did. That was.
I did.
I was like, wait a second. Did they just mention that? Oh, okay. Just gonna move past that. Okay. And that's why I'm kind of concerned about them dealing with pain. Because I'm like, they kind of glossed over parental abuse. Like, okay.
It was a multi-pronged sort of how do I call it? Like a approach or thrusting of this trope right? Of it felt like there were several moments in the episode that probably kind of on their own you might look the other way, but like it felt like episode 8 there was this big cumulative case against the adaptation or the writing or whatever of Given, because it really felt like well, here's the tragic gay character trope kind of in full force, and I couldn't believe, I was shocked because
kill you gays right there, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just the hands of the creatives felt much more like I felt better. I was like, okay, these are some deft writers. They were in good hands. But man, they really dropped the ball in episode 8. I felt in a couple of ways, that being one of them. Shadon, I think we'll get to the other one.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just elaborate on that whole father abusing there. Where for me, like looking at it from the perspective of a writer, can you drop Matthew's father being abusive from the show entirely without consequence? And that to me is such an easy yes. It's actually kind of hilarious.
Oh yeah.
I mean, to me, its purpose functionally serves to have Matthew and Yuki get close. But as we've alluded to with the whole, gay tragedy trope that is, as you say, quite tired and also completely unnecessary, can't people just hook up because they like each other? Is that such an alien concept?
Oh yeah, no, that reminds me of one of my favorite, horrible, tragic backstories in the Ninth Hour kind of stories from an anime. Are any of you guys familiar with the anime Fushigi Yugi?
No.
Fushigi Yugi is a 90s, I guess you would call it isekai, because it is basically an isekai, but it's not. It's like mid-90s.
If I may intervene for a second, I just had a funny thought.
Go for it.
When you when you say 90s isekai, like 90s, no, but then isekai were better in the 90s. So this feels like a contradiction in of itself.
Oh no, isekai was good at one point, and then
pre-self-aware isekai.
Oh man,
no, this is so. But it's also okay. So to give you some background, the mangaka for Fushigi Yugi, I think her name was Uwatase, I believe her name was.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, she's a pretty big deal in the shoujo manga field. But Fushigi Yugi was her first project. She was like younger than I am actually when she did the whole thing. So props to her. But she kind of fell in love with her main antagonist, and she admitted as much. She said like, "Oh my god, I love Nakago. He's so hot. He's so cool." And she'd say it in the notes of her manga. So going in, you're like, "Wow, this guy's a real like complete monster." He does some things in the show that are just abhorrent and vile, and you think like, okay, I know the manga has a crush on him. The manga writer has a crush on him. So what's she gonna do at the end? And then at the very last, one of the last scenes of the first arc, when the spoiler alert for a over 20-year-old anime, they kill him. They punch a hole through his chest. He has like a flashback.
Damn.
Yeah, they have like the main character has like a weird psychic mind meld flashback where he sees like Nakago's like a kid being like his mother's killed, then he's turned into a child escort for the emperor, and then he's turned into a soul. It's like every possible like bad cliche all in like 30 seconds. It's like
God.
All at once in montage form, and you're like, well, and that's it.
Man, that is pretty bad. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, that show's a problematic thing for me. Like I love it, but it is a mess.
Nothing's perfect.
No, God, no. Especially not that.
So yeah, I think that like the whole like even just beyond like what you feel about its offensiveness or not, it's just completely functionally irrelevant to the show. Which
like
is often why I
exhibit...
find dislaw cases. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was just gonna say it's like Exhibit A of if you were sort of writing a class on how to do an adaptation, you'd be like, here is an example of fat you could trim. This whole thing.
Yep.
Well, actually,
but it was untrimmed.
It's unnecessary.
The irony of that, though, is that I can see an alternate version of Given where this leans into stuff that I talked about in relation to Kasai and also to Yayoi, but it also goes wider than that because parents in general in Given are pretty much absent. Like, I was stunned that, Uenoyama's father, appeared in episode 10. I was like, where the fuck have you been?
I almost, at one point, was like, are these guys in college? Is that why these parents don't exist?
I don't know. But that's the thing, right?
And they went to what's his name, Mafuyu's apartment, and he's like, "Isn't your mom home? Like you have a mom?"
I know. I thought it was like made in a test tube or something. But anyway, the reason I bring this up though is because, and this admittedly again is outside of my field of personal experience as a cishet guy. But so Anthony, feel free to chime in, if you've got any thoughts on what I'm talking, even if it's just to say I'm chatting complete bullshit here. But my understanding is that coming out it's never easy.
No. Oh God, no. Oh,
and
never.
And a big part of that, in fact, probably the biggest part of it for a lot of queer people, is probably coming out to family, because they're people that you've been close to your entire life, who, for one reason or another, may not know or may not realize, or maybe they've known all along, and the fact that Given doesn't, for Inuyama, dealing with his own sexuality, which it does really well, in my opinion. The conversation out with Akiko is probably the second best moment in the show's run, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But we'll, of course, cover that later.
No, definitely.
But parents, and family being involved in, the moment when you come out is, of my understanding, one of the biggest parts of it. And yet the family plays so little part in Given's, examination of this. Now, on the one hand, I could critique that for as is, which is to say that it really should be a part of it. Which is to say that, Yayoi, for example, could have much more involvement, being involved in, talking with a brother. And like I've said before, that doesn't even need to be positive. She could be antagonistic, and that could then lead into a lesson of you discard, family that aren't good for you in that result, that aren't accepting of who you are. It's not necessary that you stick with them. And then, of course, you've got Kasai. Well, Kasai's not family, but then you've got the parents as well, Uenoyama's father, being involved. But, on the other hand, I can also make a counter-argument, which is to say that one way or another, it doesn't matter on a wider level. Obviously, it matters very much to individuals, or a lot of individuals who are queer, and understanding that they're queer, that their family, accept them for who they are. But the wider message is that fuck them if they don't. You be who you are, and they don't need to be involved at any point in you learning about yourself and accepting yourself for who you are. You've got the people around you who matter the most already, which in this case is the band. So
found family.
It could work either way. Yeah, it could work either way, in my opinion. But I think as presented, as to go back what you said about how there are certain bits that just didn't feel quite fleshed out. Matthew's father being the abuse one, expanded into a much wider story where we understand why, and not of course to agree with his actions, far from it. Funnily enough, I recently watched Mararu Penguin Drum episode. Yeah, you know exactly which one I'm referring to. I can't look at sculptures ever again.
Penguin Drum. Oh my god. Well, actually, to be fair, the problem is I'm actually not sure which episode you watched, because there's so many moments in that series where it goes that's traumatic.
Exactly.
Do you mean
exactly?
Do you mean the very explosive episodes?
I'm thinking of Yuri's father specifically, the sculptor, the one that almost made me throw up.
Oh, okay, we haven't.
But that's a discussion for a different time. But that's a character who we understand his reasoning for doing what he does, even though what he's doing is absolutely and utterly reprehensible and vile and awful. Whereas Matthew's father, he is Sir not appearing in this film. Whereas if expanded upon greatly, he could be Sir appearing in this film and Sir appearing meaningfully in this film as well.
Yeah, I have thoughts on that. I think you do touch on something very important, but the thing you want to consider also is that by expanding it, you change what the show is trying to accomplish.
True.
You have to consider whenever any story, you have to remember what's the writer's intention, how do they reach that intention, do they accomplish that intention? If the intention of Given is to be a fun, enjoyable story about finding happiness after the loss of someone valuable, finding a family where you might be otherwise alone, then I'm not so sure that the father playing any role, of actually any of their fathers or mothers, would play any role in that narrative. because the problem with and this is especially true with works that are aimed at a teenage audience. Adults are very hard to write because it takes the story away from the teenage characters. If you look at a lot of teenage-focused anime or shows or even books or movies that focus on teens, the parents play a minimal role unless they directly interfere with the lives of their kids. And there's a few exceptions to that. I won't reference Ava again because I could easily reference Ava when talking about terrible parents. I'll avoid it because that's an easy target. That's an easy one.
Yeah.
I can spend hours talking about even like Asuka's mom, even that. But that alone's an essay I could probably write for some sites. I'll avoid wasting that now. I can get paid for it later. No,
we don't want to take. I was going to say we don't want to take food off your plate here.
Exactly. No, a great example I was thinking of actually was Ranma 1/2 with Ranma's dad. Ranma's dad only plays a role as it pertains directly to the conflict in Ranma's life. And he is the basic cause of the problems. He starts most of the issues. He brings him to China to the... Have you guys seen Ranma 1/2? I realize I'm going off...
No. So I've seen some of it, not by any means all of it, because there's a lot.
Oh, there's a ton. Rumiko Takahashi does not know how to make a short story. She can't. Well, she can actually, but just no one reads them, so they don't make as much money. So she just goes on forever, because it's more profitable, I guess. And she's good at it. But but with Ranma 1/2, the parents of all the characters really don't play a role unless it's absolutely necessary for that plot that they play a role. And the core issues of Given don't really have the parents tie into it. Mostly teenage love, self-identity, finding yourself, finding family and those around you who respect and care for you, recovering from the death of someone valuable. And in stories like that, isolation is really important. I think a good scene, I won't say great because it's ripping off another anime, and I'll say in a second, is I think it's episode 5 or 6 when Mafuyu is walking around and he's on the train, he goes to the beach and he goes back and forth, and there's a really nice echo later on where he brings Ritsuka to the beach with him, and I love that echo. I love that visual motif where you feel like. And there's actually another echo, too, at the end of the credits, I think in episode 9 or so, where he flashes back to him with Yuki on the beach. It's a really great, I want to say, leitmotif of that beach playing a role of isolation, memories fading in the sand, recovery, coming back to that. I like that.
Footsteps fading and all that,
Yeah, footsteps fading in the sand that get washed away. I love that visual. I love that concept. It's really, I don't want to say it's the best scene in the series, because I do think the song is a highlight. But it definitely is a really good idea. I say it's almost a great scene because the build up to that is like a rip-off of episode 4 from Evangelion.
Right.
Or was episode 3, episode 4, where he's on the train, he goes around, it's the train's slowly getting smaller because it shows. But what Ava does differently
is have cicadas. that's the only thing that's lacking.
No, but there's something else too. There's another important factor that Ava does. They show the train fill up and then slowly empty, and he's still not moving. Everything around him is moving. Life, even the people who are still on the train, they've shifted somewhat. Whereas with what Given does is just show him alone on the train, they move to the next location, or they'll cut to him alone still. They won't linger. And I feel like the lack of parents adds the sense of isolation. It adds that sense of you're alone.
Yeah.
Whereas that scene almost could have done that in a very potent way, but instead takes a little shortcut, which it still gets the point across. It doesn't get it. Doesn't get it as well as it could have gotten it had it made a couple small differences. And I think that's the big issue with Given. I think its big ideas, they work, but it's the smaller details that keep those big ideas from really resonating enough as a narrative, I feel like. But again, that's my really good.
No, this is a really good point you bring up about the lack of parents sort of serving the story's greater themes, which I think, it can. You could definitely sort of make the case that it uses it to take shortcuts, and a lot of anime are guilty of this.
A lot of stories are guilty of this.
So yes, no, for sure, but yes, that is true. And I think of Shadon first really came out with this complaint, or maybe not first, but I remember you really ranting about this regarding Scum's Wish, because you're like, where are these kids' families? But like they would have just really kind of gummed up the works when it comes to like the plot and getting from A to B. And I sort of don't know a lot of times if that is done just to prevent that gumming up of the works, or if it's also meant to be some sort of intentional or unintentional commentary about absentee parents in Japan. But I think, Anthony, you hit it on the head that most often, at least the examples I can think of in anime, when you have these kind of parentless kids, it is to serve like the mood and the isolation of the teenage protagonists.
Also, adults are hard to write. Yeah. Let's be blunt about it. Why do you think all the adults on Attack on Titan end up dying or leaving or getting eaten somewhere?
I don't know. I mean, I died of boredom first watching that show, so
that's the most overrated. I'll go on record and say this: Attack on Titan is the most overrated anime of the last decade. Even more so than Sword Art Online, because no one thinks Sword Art Online is good.
You only disagree with me on that.
But anyway,
we're joking all around here.
Yeah, I mean, and I haven't really just to address. So I haven't seen that much Attack on Titan. I've seen the first season, and I enjoyed it. But even still, I agree with you because I think the praise is quite outsized.
Like Attack on Titan is a fun series. It's just people take it too seriously. It's not Berserk. It's not really brilliant fantasy storytelling. It's good storytelling. It's fun enough, but people often rank it up alongside like Full Metal Alchemist, and I'm like,
oh my god!
Like I've seen there was a because I read a lot of these lists because it's my job now technically, and also I like to look at other opinions. I like to be told I'm wrong, so I think it's fun, and I like to argue with them too. It's fun. It's even more fun that way. But so I was reading like a list on some site, I won't say which one, which ranked Attack on Titan above FMA, the Brotherhood and the 2000s one, above Samurai Champloo, above Gurren Lagann, which I thought was, that one personally hurt, above a lot of other ones. I think the only ones that ranked above it were, oddly enough, Serial Experiments Lane, and I think... I want to say Death Note.
Well, that destroys my theory, which I thought that the list was a recency bias thing, but no, that's not the case.
No. And I don't even think Ava was on the list, now I think about it, in hindsight. Did I mention Bebop? I think that was on the list too, but I forget where it was.
Oh my god, really?
I think it was on the list. I think Bebop was lower than I wanted to be. I think Trigun actually outranked it there, but... Again, I don't remember what site it was for. I couldn't even click it.
All I'll say about Attack on Titan is that I think it's great if you just completely turn off all of the dialogue. If it's a silent movie, it's infinitely better as a result.
Well, not silent, I like that music.
No, the music's great, but just don't let any of the characters actually say a damn word, and it's so much better for it.
But
anyway...
Back to Given.
To come back to Given, there is another thing that I would like to discuss with you, Anthony, which relates to episode 8 and its big problem, which is Hiragi speaking to us, as in the audience, asking for forgiveness and explaining more, or rather the backstory of Yuki and Matthew's relationship and what happened. Now, you mentioned you hadn't listened to our opinion because you wanted to hear it, like, go into this fresh without preconceived notions, which is good. I will recount my reaction to it, which was basically... I was mad. I was very, very angry at that. And I was annoyed at it for a couple of reasons. The first of which is that he's telling it to us specifically, the audience, breaking the fourth wall, so like with that inner monologue. But Hiragi is not a fully fleshed out character, nor is he even like in the main like group. Like he's not the main four. I couldn't fathom for the life of me what purpose that served. And this is moving away from LGBTQ plus stuff to more towards talking about suicide, because myself and Doc, we've covered Orange previously, which in my opinion handles it better, which is not to say that Given necessarily handles it badly, But I'm also of the opinion, as we said before, why can't he just hook up? Because why not? Anyway,
I thought they kind of did for a minute handle it badly. By the end of episode 8, we were both pretty upset.
Well, the thing is, like our discussion of that podcast, I remember gradually got more and more like fevered as it went on.
Mm-hmm.
I started getting more. I started getting more and more sarcastic. And that's usually a sign of when I'm starting to feel some real venom. When I start, like, making insults and stuff. But anyway, like, for me, like, Hiragi's discussion to us, like, his, like, confession, if you will, would have been better served if he was delivering it to Ueniyama. Because Ueniyama, starting with Kasai and, like, her revelation that, Matthew was dating a guy who died. That to me felt like it would have been a natural building block towards him then, talking with Matthew more about it. Like, you've got a sense of progression. You go from, I don't even know this person's name, to, I know this person's name and I know some of what happened from the limited perspective of a person in that in-group, to, I'm now actually talking and getting a better understanding from the person who was closest to them. What's your feeling on that scene where he confesses that to us?
I'm going to be honest with you. That scene didn't leave much of an impression on me either way. I'm trying to think exactly how I didn't think too much of it, honestly, because I don't mind it when the character breaks the fourth wall too much. I think it's sloppy, but I don't find it too infuriating. My problem,
I think it was more I think Shadon's issue is more like, why is the fourth wall breaker this sort of tertiary character who's basically in the show only to do this? You know what I mean? Yep. Like, I feel like it could have been another. He could have found out, or we the audience could have found out the information that he divulges to us in a number of different ways that wouldn't have, like, I don't know. And that's the only time we really kind of get his perspective, like the thoughts inside his head.
He's not a character who's really well established, and I can see from a writing standpoint why you'd want to say, hey, this character has feelings. How do we get this across on the screen?
Yeah.
What do you do? And I do think I don't disagree with you. I think they would be better served in a chat, offhand comment, maybe a conversation with another character, any character. But if I said the idea of a tertiary character having a monologue like that, where he divulges his personality and stuff like that, is bad writing, I would be really hypocritical, because a lot of great writers have done that. I guess the best example of that, I think a good example of this would be someone like, say, Shakespeare. Sorry, I had to do that. I'm sorry. I couldn't resist that one. He's full of
Oh, you're making me remember when I studied Henry V now, and I'm like, oh, here's Henry doing all this stuff, but what's Pistol up to? Getting pissed up in like some pub somewhere and bitching about the French and all that. Like,
yeah,
you're right.
The one I think of a lot is one of the earliest scenes in King Lear, where like, oh, here's my one son, he's good. Here's my other son, he's a bastard, but I kept him anyway. And it's like, thank you for that expository statement. It's like, I loved his mother quite a lot, but I loved her so much I got this baby out of it. You have to see. It's one of those things where, like, it's a classic technique. It's when a writer doesn't know how to relay information naturally in the screenplay, or
I'm just most surprised that Shakespeare came up with the pilot episode for something like Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh my god.
That's what that feels like.
Oh my god. Yeah, basically. No, but like,
oh,
no.
Dear.
So that scene doesn't bother me too much. I can think of a dozen other ways I would have done it differently, but I also feel like this is a problem with the show's pacing, and I think this will transition to me talking about my biggest issue with the series.
Sure.
Which is pacing. Because I don't have too many thoughts on that one scene. I think it could be done differently. I think it was done sloppily, but didn't. Ultimately, for me, it's minor because it's a victim of a bigger problem for me, and that is the show is awkwardly paced. So, I as you guys know, I binge watched the whole series, from start to finish, and I think I liked it more as a result of that, because it felt to me like a 3-act structure for a film. And it applies very well to that, except for one thing. Now, if you're not familiar, and if your listeners aren't familiar, the 3-act structure is typically defined as the beginning, middle, and end of a story. There's a really great book called Save the Cat, I forget the author, that created what's called a beat sheet that a lot of films to this day still use, where they go, okay, so on page 5, you have to have your character introduced. By page 11, the first conflict's going to happen. And they go by page by page by page. And the idea is that with a properly paced story, your story will relay information at a consistent pace so your audience is never bored.
Blake Snyder is the author of that, by the way.
Oh, Blake Snyder? Okay, perfect. There we go. I have it somewhere in my house. I
had to check my Audible.
There you go. It's a great book. I love it. It's so useful for writing, and it's so useful for studying writing as well. Had he looked at the screenplay for Given, he would have said the emotional climax happened 3 episodes to the end. And that you could have spaced it out better, and that there's not enough new material in the middle. It's kind of like a saggy middle. There's no... the turning point in the story happens in episode 5. At the end of episode 5, when you learn that Yuki killed himself. That is the turning point of the story. And from there, it can only... You begin going downhill towards the climax. That's the problem with the screenplay. They revealed the tragic backstory way too soon. It had nothing really to follow it up on. The story really does shift to be about trauma after that point, and there's never any moment where they really introduce a new concept other than the parental abuse aspect, or developing more into that trauma. And I think the problem is they played their big card too early. I think that's what the issue is, because at the end you're like, we have all this extra space to fill. The emotional climax is already here. They've already become a band. They've already, overcome the big conflict. Will he play or will he not play? And it stops being about, if they had maybe saved it to episode 7 and spent the earlier episodes developing Mafuyu as a character more, showing his likes and interests, the more small moments, all of that would have been more resonant, I think.
So yeah. I'm going to disagree.
Go for it.
I'm not here.
Yeah, I'm not like an absolute authority on this. Go for it.
Oh no. And I think I think Snyder's book is quite useful when you're talking about like a Hollywood movie, right? And how to write a good movie that will get butts in seats, so to speak.
Oh yeah.
I think when it comes to serialized fiction, be it comics or TV, I think the rules are a little bit looser.
Oh yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that that writers can get away with going outside that rigid structure in different ways, and it still be successful to me. And this is a very sort of personal take, but I quite enjoy, Shadon talked about, not Erase at Violet Evergarden. I think this sort of happened in Yuri on Ice also in a way that
Yuri on Ice has some pacing issues too.
Yeah,
pacing issues.
Yeah, that the big kind of emotional release, the climax, the audience catharsis occurs about 2/3 of the way through the story, and in Given, unlike Yuri on Ice, the remaining episodes are there as almost like self-care episodes for the audience. And I think the show sort of or in the manga, I guess, sort of understands that at least its audience enjoys the kind of the puffier, lighter stuff that you get more of in the final 2 episodes, with some character moments, of course, and some stuff of significance, but it's mainly feel good. And I think I'm okay with that. It may contribute to the sort of nicheification of works like this, but in a serial format, I think I'm okay with that kind of structure. Now, I said earlier that I thought the show was a little too long, and I stand by that still. There are some moments in the middle where things felt kind of slow. But as far as when the peak happens and what happens after the peak, I'm largely okay with it.
For me, the last 3 episodes are solid for Given. I think they're really good, and I think what they do so well, and I'm going to explain why this. I'm going to match this up with what I just said previously. I think what they do really well is they show the whole found family aspect of it. That's what the show seems to be trying to accomplish. Found family, recovering from loss. I think the problem for me isn't the ending, it's the middle. But I do feel it goes on too long, so it does solve the primary conflict too early. So pacing-wise, what I would say, and here's why I brought up Save the Cat more than, because I do agree with you. Even with Hollywood, that structure should not be followed as a rule. It should be followed as guidelines. Right. I feel like it should be followed as a general idea. If you follow anything too strictly, you're going to start stepping on your own feet, I think. But what it does so well is say, okay, new information here. There should be a turning point at some point, maybe a few turning points even. My big issue really is this. The conflict of the found family is resolved separately from the conflict of the band in a way where it's too distant. I feel like, imagine how would it be like, and I'm going to use Yuri on Ice as a comparison because even though the middle of that series does have problems, I think it introduces way too many characters once you get to the tournament arc, essentially, of the show. I think it does really well. What does really well is it combines the external conflict of the sports with the internal conflict of the relationship. And I feel like Given almost did this. It was so close to doing one key thing, and the big thing for me is this. When they get into their fight right before the concert and the string breaks, and it ends the episode. And then you get to the next episode, and that argument kind of is resolved off screen because of the... Wait, did the episode end? I forget if it ended...
No, you're right. You're right.
Okay.
Episode 8
once I said that
way.
Yeah, because I watched them all at once. I didn't have time to really... So once I said that, I'm like, wait, am I wrong? Okay, so after the episode, he breaks the string. Next episode, that tension doesn't carry over so much into episode 9, really, as well as they could have. It focuses more on the external problems. But the internal conflict is resolved off screen and then is kind of feeds into episodes 10 and 11. And I do feel they're really good aftercare episodes. I think they're really good, but I feel like those two problems should have been resolved as one as opposed to separately.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point there, yeah.
And you look at, like, again, using Yuri on Ice as a comparison, it has a very similar element, but at the very end of the series, last 2 episodes. The episode, I think, 11? Is it 12 episodes? I think, 12 episodes. Episode 11 ends with Yuri, spoilers for a show everyone has seen, hopefully, to this point.
Go watch it.
Yeah, it's excellent. I love it. Has problems, but I love it. End of episode 11, Yuri decides to break it off with Victor, which then feeds into the conflict. There's a whole... It's not resolved off screen. He's crying. It's sad. And you can tell where both characters are coming from. You can see that it's the internal conflict between a character who sees himself as worthless and thinks he's doing the other guy a favor by breaking it off, and the other guy who sees him as the world to him and can't understand why he's being hurt. And that feeds in with the whole conflict that's been going throughout the entire series up until that point. And Matt paired up with the greater conflict of the tournament and the ice skating and everything. And the show manages to resolve all these conflicts in the last 4 minutes of the episode. It does it all at the same time. And that's very hard. It's not easy to do that. It's not easy. It is tough. It's easier to break it down and make it simpler, to digest one problem, then move on to the next. But I feel Given...
It's created by a real powerhouse. She's able to do that.
Oh, yeah. She's brilliant as a writer. Oh, my God. Michiko and... No, so yes. I'm going to stop babbling about... Yeah. Okay. The point is that the series Given would have been better suited, I think, if it paced the issues leading to its finale better so that everything intersects at that big concert. I feel like a lot of episode 12 and 11 could have happened before the concert, in theory, and still worked.
Yeah, like, for example, bringing forward Haruki's, no public performance scene. Yeah,
Exactly.
because that to me like feels like the setup of a really, as we discussed before, a really really interesting plot thread that has a lot of things to say about queer relationships and also band dynamics. I mean, the band stuff alone, like the idol stuff, like we've got to present a clean cut image for all the girls out there who are like, that alone could be really fascinating. And then you've got it blended together with the queer element, and then that's like analogous to each other, like they blend really. I can see that being incredible, and that's what I hope the movie delivers on. And that's also why I personally didn't have the same like Erased or Violet Evergarden complaint to the same degree, because it promised a new like thread to follow through on, as opposed to here's some nice little episodes that are good on their own, but they don't really mean anything in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly. It continues. The story continues. So how do you feel about Given's movie going head to head with the Yuri on Ice movie in 2020?
Oh my god!
Oh,
that's gonna be a thing, isn't it?
Man.
Man, Twitter's gonna be. Well, it already is a dumpster fire, but it's going to be something different around that day. Holy shit.
Yeah, that got delayed. It was supposed to come out like this month or next month, something like that initially, but then they were like, yeah, so we're going to make it bigger than we expected, so we're going to delay the Yuri on Ice film again? Sorry? Wow. I'm like, I mean, it kind of works out now.
Yeah.
I mean, and
I guess you could say it was put on the back burner.
Oh, yeah. We'll go with that.
You wanted to say ice, didn't you?
No, I didn't. What are you talking about? I'm not buying that for a second. So yeah. All right. We're going to move on from that, because that was all really interesting, by the way, Anthony. So thank you very much for offering your thoughts on that. That was all great.
No, thank you.
The one thing that we want to ask you as well, in particular, to move away from those...
I'm sorry,
sorry, go on.
I apologize for cutting in, but knowing the topic you're about to introduce, and I think that deserves, like, me clearing out of the runway. But, like, I wanted to bring up just a couple things before we go to that and then patron stuff. Because I feel like we have been, if not negative, very critical up to this point, right? Which is all well and good and fine. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to take a moment to appreciate some of the kind of more overarching things about the show that I really liked. One of those being the tone of the show. I thought that the tone actually sort of matches up really well with Mishiru's soundtrack. I thought that was sort of a nice expression of the tone that the show was going for. Very warm, very welcoming, relaxing in a way. And despite the kind of, heavy subject matter and conflicts, I think overall that tone is pretty constant, and that's the kind of thing that for me as an anime viewer will stick with me more so than kind of the way that the show appealed to me intellectually, or kind of structural things, like the kind of the way it touched me emotionally with things like the tone or its high points is probably the thing I'm going to like take away from it and kind of recall years down the road, and it was a very positive thing. And like in the tone, I was worried that like the first episode, especially kind of how Mafuyu was behaving, I was very worried that everything would end up feeling quite artificial. But to me it didn't, from where I sit. And despite the fact that, like you were saying, Anthony, that tropes are employed, they're deployed skillfully, I think, by and large, but nonetheless, tropes are deployed. It's still managed to not feel kind of generated in a laboratory. It felt like things felt organic. And I think that like the things that you were saying about the beach and the kind of sense of place that the show has, combined with the tone that I was talking about, kind of help it feel help it ring more true than feel kind of No, you're good.
No, I just burped. I feel bad about that.
Oh, it's okay. We can.
I had like
post.
all the teas before, so it's a fact. Sorry, as you were. So sorry.
No worries. The other thing, or should I? I'm sorry. Did you want to comment on that before I change topic?
No. I was going to bring up something very quickly myself that I'm not going to elaborate on too much because it's only a small thing. But this is one of the things I really liked about the show in general that I never really touched upon apart from just mentioning it moment by moment, which is the dialogue between the characters to me was really, really solid.
No,
it felt authentic to people of that age where they don't speak like robots. They don't speak like aliens. They're not lifeless either. They do have personalities that reflect in how they talk and the comments and the quips and the jokes they make. Like the fun stuff with Matthew, like, post-performance, like saying, take my hand, it's dangerous. Or, Ugetsu talking to Akiko saying, coffee. And he's like, I'm not coffee. What are you talking about? I'm not coffee.
Right.
Yeah. Now, but on the thing I like about that, though, is that it strikes a nice balance because it gives them life and it gives them quips and jokes when it's appropriate, but they don't turn into Quentin Tarantino characters where everything they say...
Joss Whedon character.
Where everything they say is a quippy line or where everyone's just too smart for their own good. And don't get me wrong, I like those characters in those settings. I mean, I love Pulp Fiction, for example. I love Reservoir Dogs. But they have a very specific tone and style about them. So they had the needle right where it needed to be in the sweet spot for the authenticity and the humour of the dialogue that also informs us of their personalities and reinforces what we know about them. So I just wanted to note that because it's not a thing, as I say, that each individual episode feels like it needs to be highlighted in reams and reams of detail. But if you've listened to our podcasts on Given up until this point, you'll probably note how many times I've commented on individual moments like the coffee one, for example, and bringing them all together, it really is notable how good the dialogue is in this show.
Oh yeah, no, I'll tell you this right now. I loved this is one of those shows where I love all the minor characters so much. I really do. I know I was critical of it before, a lot, but I think one thing it has that's really good is I really love how the characters were. Hang on, you guys are here, right?
Yes, no,
yeah,
totally.
I was totally silent. I was like, wait, did I lose the call? It was really bad.
My spirit just left my body for a second, but I've reeled it back in.
Right.
I'm kidding.
I was like, oh my god, no. But I mean, here's the thing. I think you have to be critical of things you respect, and I respect
no question. No, that
yes.
No.
That preface was not me dragging you or anything that we've said.
No.
It was just more of a segue.
No, I realize, and I think it's important. But I think also it's important for anyone listening to know that, I'm being critical of it, but I'm being critical because it's worthy of criticism. You know what I mean?
It's a good point. Yeah, very good way to put it.
Like, I don't criticize it sort of online extensively because it's not worth that time. It's like kicking a bag of trash around the room.
I thought you were about to say a cannon, and I was almost going to wince.
No, I'm not gonna kick. I'm not teasing feline violence here today.
Oh, a can of soda.
Oh, I thought you said a cat.
Yeah, because that has painful memories for me. When you're talking about not wasting your time criticizing something.
This is what Shadon loves to do: is criticize things not worthy of his time.
No, and that was me when I was younger. I get so upset over whatever the thing was. I think Twilight for years was like, oh, it's so terrible. Oh my god! And then you look back and you're like, was it worth that? Was it worth that much passion? Probably not. And also, I love the bandmates. I love those characters. Like, especially, I every time we went back to that coffee shop and he's like tying his hair back and pouring coffee, or just whenever we were with, just I love him, the little detail of him trimming his hair by the sink, just making sure the ends don't get. I love those. Those are the parts I love. My biggest complaint is I wish we had more moments like that.
Yeah.
Throughout, those tiny moments really bring the characters to life. And one thing, I'm sure you guys mentioned this on the individual episodes, but I haven't mentioned it, so I will. I adore the ending theme. I adore that ending sequence. I think it's so such sweet dream fuel, and I love the visual. Like, I love simple ending themes to anime. I feel they're always overlooked, but a real simple melodic one like that really helps leave you with a note that's memorable, note that you walk away feeling what they want you to feel in a way that's effective. If that makes any sense. If that makes any sense.
Right, yeah.
I feel like I mungled that point up a little bit.
Nope. I get where you're coming from, for sure.
That's all good.
And
Doc, you had another topic you wanted to bring up, didn't you?
Yeah, just very briefly, and mainly because I feel like there are people that will listen to this podcast that won't have listened to our episodic analysis. So I'll just briefly state here, and know that I talked about it in depth in other places, but that a thing that I really liked about the show, especially being married to an artist, is like the fact that it says without outright saying it, I feel, that art has kind of these, like the purpose of it is multifaceted. It doesn't just come out and say, here is why art, right? It shows that like art, people make art for all kinds of valid and good reasons, and it serves both the artist and the appreciator in all kinds of different ways. Like you can make it because you want to experience the feeling of creating something. You can make it as a form of bloodletting. You can make it as an attempt to communicate something that is by spoken direct word incommunicable, but for whatever reason a piece of visual or oral art will will allow the message to better find its way into people's minds and hearts. And I think the show does a really nice, kind of simple, clean job of illustrating those points and showing them rather than sort of waxing philosophical about them. And I liked that.
No, I agree. That's a big thing. I don't have the connection to art as much, but writing, yeah. I think it relayed that beautifully. I have nothing to add to what you just said. I just wanted to agree with it.
Good stuff. So, Anthony, we want to now just move on to the other thing that we want to discuss with you, which is given as a queer and or LGBTQ plus work. So I'm referring specifically to the scene that really impressed me in the show with Akiko and Ueniyama. Because to me it felt like it was exactly what he needed, and in turn what I think a lot of people who are discovering that they are LGBTQ plus at that age that he is would want to hear as well, and having a piece of media. Which scene
specifically are you referring to, just so I know exactly what I'm...
It's the one where Akiko and Ueniyama are talking in episode 7 near the vending machines, in which Akiko like outright says like, "You've had your dirty mitts on him," like as a joke.
No, yeah.
That's the... Yes.
Oh, yeah.
But then he sort of kind of goes on to actually like... I mean, that joke is a kind of opener for a more empathetic conversation on his part, right? Where he says like, I've liked guys, or I've been with guys, and and that's cool, that sort of thing, where he offers like an understanding shoulder to Uenoyama. Am I right, Shadon? Is that okay?
That's correct. So do you feel like, I mean, I personally have not got nowhere near as much experience with anime in general as say Doc has, never mind anime that has queer themes in it. Do you feel like that scene and Given in general is a positive force for LGBTQ plus narratives in anime, and that it's a good thing for people to have more narratives like that out there, for people who are coming to terms with their own sexuality?
I do. I think in general it's a very positive force, but there are problems from that perspective, through that lens. I think it's an imperfect portrayal, but I think it's a good one. I don't think it's because if you go dig into like, and this actually kind of got into when I was researching the anime feminist article that you guys referenced before. I went through a lot of older 90s manga for comparisons, or in 2000s 90s manga and anime. There's a lot of toxicity surrounding that, where people they treat the relationship as either lesser or immoral in some way, like a taboo that needs to be culturally crossed. And I think that particular line teases realistically the tension between how we perceive the validity of a same-sex relationship versus the validity of an opposite-sex one. And I think it's very important. I think it's very good. I think it's very good to address that. However, let's say someone is questioning themselves. Let's say someone is going to that for the first time in their lives, trying to find the words to articulate it, unsure how to say it. It could be very troubling if the phrase dirty mitts are used as a point of comparison, if it's used as like, an ensnarement, because that's very common in a lot of homophobic rhetoric, that you are ensnaring or snatching or stealing someone away from the righteous path, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So I can see that being problematic. I'm not saying it's bad, because it's not. It's a fairly neutral, fairly lighthearted, like you said, fairly lighthearted. It's not anything super negative. And I also said before, you want to incorporate tropes. You want to incorporate cliches that are used in more mainstream fiction, straight fiction. You see that stuff like "Get your mitts out of my man" all the time in like rom-coms where the two girls are fighting over, or the two guys are fighting over the girl or whatever. You see it all the time, so it only makes sense it's going to be used elsewhere. But I can see if it's someone who is in a less secure spot, I can see that being problematic. I can see it upsetting them a little bit in a way that's...
yeah.
I can see that element of it. I don't think I reacted that way at all. I didn't... For me, it was like, that's kind of... Now they're going to find out now he's... the band is going to be a little complicated there. But but I can definitely see someone reacting in a way that is, on the whole, less positively.
Yeah.
Because it's all about perception.
I understand.
Yeah. Do I think so? I think it was fine. I think it was good enough. I think but I can see the fault line through which someone might get uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, I think from what you said there, you made a very good point that's given me more understanding, because I think that if you take this show in a vacuum and these characters in a vacuum, I think that kind of joke, and then leading on to the discussion they had where Ueneyama says, is there anything wrong with me? And Akiko's like, no, of course not, that's all fantastic. Mm-hmm. But I think that joke and that as an icebreaker towards Ueneyama was what he personally needed at that time. Mm-hmm. To try and get him to react, try and get him to open up.
Exactly.
But you are entirely correct, Anthony, in saying that that's not the approach that should be taken with everyone. Mm-hmm. You could have, for example, two people who are of equivalent ages to both Ueneyama and Akiko in real life or in fiction or wherever, where they are radically different people, though.
Oh, yeah.
One still serving as a mentor role, one not. And it needs to be handled differently. So that kind of approach, I think that what Gibbon is saying is that in this instance, it's what was needed, and we shouldn't shy away from, having those conversations, but it's how we conduct them that is very crucial.
Yeah, and not just that, I feel. Because on one hand, internally, it's the best thing for him. He needs to express himself. His whole arc is finding a voice for himself to express these feelings, all contained in that skinny little body, as they put it in the show. I love that line. There's having people that sadness in that body. I love it. But no, I think with most things, it's hard to account for everyone's experience in when writing something so sensitive. In fact, I think it's sometimes better not to take every account into consideration, because you're going to write something that will resonate with some people and upset other people. It's inevitable. No matter what you do, you're going to hurt someone when you write a story that's at all about anything. It's impossible.
You blend too many things together to try and please everyone, and it just loses all its flavour.
Exactly.
So yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
No, that's fair.
Sorry.
No, that's right. So, okay, that's cool. I as a cishet guy, I'm obviously not fully equipped to comment on this kind of stuff, but that is a very good perspective you provide. I say thank you very much for offering that to us.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Oh, sorry, going? Yes.
No, sure. I just wanted to ask a follow-up that if you thought... in a more broad sense, that the romance between the two leads, if it felt as kind of genuine or kind of organically developing to you as it did to me? Like, or did it or did it feel kind of forced, or like some sort of spreadsheet / checklist situation?
This is interesting because I feel like the relationship between Akiko, yes, and Haruki,
Akihiko, right? Yeah,
Akihiko and Haruki resonates far better for me than the one with the main one. Mm-hmm. I think the problem is the problem I have with Mafuyu as a character. Mafuyu as a character is I think he develops too slowly. I think that's my problem. I think I totally get Uniyama's attraction to him. I see that immediately. I think that's the strongest part of that relationship. I feel everything from his perspective, and I love the okay, I didn't mention this before, but I love in episode 12 when it opens up and they have like the cosmic explosion with like I love that. Oh my god.
The 2001 Space Odyssey overture playing in the background.
I love it. That's so perfect. That's so amazing.
It's mutual.
Yeah, that I think is another scene that I think is that's one of the reasons why the last few episodes are so good. That scene just takes you into like high gear. I think that aspect of the relationship works. I feel when he hears his ex, he died, he killed himself, and he has no idea how to connect the dots with that. Like, how do you react to hearing that? Like, you don't know what to do, so he just kind of doesn't say anything. And I think that is really good. I think that's really effective. I think Mafuyu's character problems hold him back from that aspect. I feel like his character doesn't really get into... He starts off at a point, stalls, and then in the last third comes into his own more, I think. I really think for all the problems that episode 8 did present, it was critical in pushing his character forward. And I feel after that, I was invested in the romance at that point. Their particular romance. I feel before that it was a little... my big issue, but this is less an issue with... I'm trying to divorce my issue with the Manic Pixie Dream Girl trope in general with his character arc, but it's hard to do so because... It's hard to do so because with... early on, it's his main role, to develop Ritsuka, to develop Uniyama. I can't pronounce names today. Wow, I am. It is one
Ritsuka's fine.
Yeah, Ritsuka. I can't. His character. He serves more as a tertiary development stool for Ritsuka to step on.
And I see what you mean.
Yeah, he's so. Yeah. That's my big issue at first, until Mafuyu's character arc starts kicking in. Then it becomes more balanced, but until then the power dynamic is so out of balance, it felt really off to me from a personal standpoint, but I also see structurally why it was done that way.
Because you've got the it feels more like if you were to ratio it, like it's not quite, the ideal thing would be to have 50-50. But it's much more tilted in Uenoyama's favour, at least early on, in terms of who gets the lion's share of development, and that ironically comes from Matthew's own presence rather than Matthew getting some back. Like, it's give and take. Yeah. So I totally get what you mean.
And to use a more positive example of how this has been done well before, I'm going to reference Yuri on Ice again. Because Victor in Yuri on Ice has no development until really episode 10, really. I mean, he has some development. He has some development throughout. Like, I think he has like bits and pieces of development that don't seem to add up until you get the clarity of the big twist in episode 10. And then you go back and you're like, oh, he's been developing this entire time. I just didn't know it because there was a piece missing from the story. And then every little character moment up until that point becomes a hugely insightful aspect to his character. And I'm not saying you need to have a big twist like that in this story, but it does help if you have the element of these elements of the character don't make sense. I don't see why this is happening. Why is he here? What does he want? And then you get that, oh. And then everything from that point onward is in a different light, which I think is really important. And that's my big issue with the romance. I don't think they had that big, oh, everything's in perspective now moment. and this is in a lot of anime, a lot of stories do that, where an element of the character will just be totally seen in a different light once one piece is plugged into place.
Mm-hmm. The one character, and funny enough, we're going to bring this up again because I've been watching it recently and it's incredible. Ringo from Moaro Penguin Drum.
Oh my god, yes. Yeah, no.
Yeah, all of her actions, like you watch it and you're like, what on earth is she doing? And then once, like, you know, the underlying narrative becomes clear, everything makes sense. Doesn't make it agreeable, of course, but you understand.
Yeah,
and it's just like, oh my god. And God, I need to talk about Penguin Drum someday, but I'll be down for that.
I'll be down for that.
I've got to stay on topic.
Yeah, no, I love.
Anyway,
my favorites, and even with the three. Oh, you haven't. I don't think you've gotten to that point yet. But the three main characters, the three siblings. Once you realize their story, it becomes like the whole show becomes a whole different beast entirely. Like, it's hard to watch. It's one of those shows where you watch it a second time and it's a totally different show than the first time. I think better for knowing what you know. And I feel like if you're going to have a character who appears less developed at first, you have to make sure that those early scenes can be read through a different light on a rewatch.
Yep.
I think that's my big issue with it. That's my big takeaway.
The BioWare twist, the Darth Revan reveal,
yeah,
as it were.
Honestly, yeah, it's a good comparison, I think. Yeah, you got to have that.
Oh, man, that stuff still gives me shakes, by the way, thinking about how I played that entire game for the first time. I was like, holy shit.
Okay, you're going to hate me for this. That was spoiled for me. When I played Old Republic.
Oh, no.
I was like, I had just gotten the game, and I think it was the... I was at Best Buy. I must have been an overly enthusiastic employer or person shopping, because I hear them mention it. I'm like, oh, okay, it's cool. And I never knew it was supposed to be a twist until I started playing. I'm like, wait a second. They haven't revealed that thing the guy told me about.
Oh, Anthony, I'm so sorry, man.
It was like they spoiled it in a way where I didn't even know it was a spoiler until I was like, oh.
Oh, shit.
Covert spoilers.
All right. Unfortunate. All right. Anyway, thank you very much for your thoughts on that. That's really I'm very glad that we have this extra perspective now, because one thing we don't want to do on this particular podcast is, like, we don't want to treat queer, like, stories or queer elements or coding or etc. as something that we will never understand. We can't touch this. We will never know the true mysteries and blah blah blah, all that bollocks.
No.
Similarly, we
cut you off there. Sorry about that.
That's okay. But similarly, we don't want to overstep our bounds and make ourselves sound more authoritative than we can actually be. We want to find that sweet spot. And similarly, we also want to make sure we have perspectives from people apart from ourselves to offer, like, you know, more insight, like, so we can get a more holistic picture. So yeah, thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. I mean, they're just stories ultimately. They're all, you know, they're drawing from human experience ultimately. And everyone, if a story can only be read by a specific audience and can't be appreciated outside of the audience, I think that story needs a little more work, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't think you should be worried about ever covering topics like that, from my perspective.
No, certainly. And I'll just, I mean, you yourself said that you'd not yet listened to our Lace podcast, so I'm just going to recount something from, again, I think is really important, which is that when I was watching Haruki, have his smoke break, so to speak, when he's talking about his feelings for Akiko and how he's just content with this situation he finds himself in. Like, even though I, as a cis-het man, like, you know, don't share that commonality of attributes with Haruki, I still immediately understand. Hell, I don't even smoke. But as I said to Doc, I've had many smoke breaks in my time of thinking about, like, the feelings I have for someone that are unrequited and coming to a kind of peace with it. And that's, as you say, like, there, where that experience, like, the story appeals to many groups. It certainly, as you say, should have its focus on who it should appeal to. I mean, one thing we've not really talked about, but I've certainly seen present, is, of course, there's a lot of camera angles and the way things are drawn and designed for the boil of elements, like, you know, close-ups of people's faces, the hairs that you mentioned, like we was cutting his hair, for example.
Akihiko's back.
Yes. All of that stuff is present, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's exactly what the show is made for. But that doesn't mean there isn't something here for everyone. And I certainly appreciate that scene, along with all the other stuff, immensely for it.
No,
okay,
I
so
agree, yeah.
it's all good. So okay, we've kind of covered everything we really wanted to cover in a kind of mishmash here, but that's all good though. Like that's the way sometimes these conversations go, and that's all for the better in my opinion. Rather than trying to turn it into a TED talk or some shit like that.
Oh, you mean
So,
you don't like your podcasts being in like chapter organized chunks?
Well, the secret podcast that no one knows about, definitely, but that's a discussion for another time.
Oh, I see how it is.
I'm cheating on you, Doc.
Oh, sad face. .jpg.
Oh man.
Did we want to talk about favorite scenes, or do you think we have touched on that?
I think we've covered that. I mean, Anthony, you mentioned Haruki's hair and such like that.
I love,
and also just being conscious of time as well.
Oh no, absolutely. I was eyeing that too. No. Yeah, I think I covered the big ones that I like. I will say one thing that I think we haven't mentioned yet. That dog.
Oh,
that is
yes.
That is a puppy. That is a feline puppy there.
He's a good dog.
He's
very
a good
cute.
Boy. I would hate for him to be an elfin lead. I'd hate it.
Oh no!
You didn't just. I feel like a klaxon should be going off in my room right now, and like all the windows and shutters should be coming down like full metal. Like we're in lockdown. We've had a containment breach.
Well, look, it could be worse.
It
could be worse. The dog could have been in Full Metal Alchemist.
Ooh, that would be worse. But Anthony, you basically just code word Excelsior shit on, and now he's going to, wander down Manchester Avenue, killing.
I've got an entire bottle of vodka, and I'm going to mix it with vodka.
We did vodka. Very early in our podcast. Early in our podcast lifespan, we did a 4.5 hour podcast on Elfen Lied. It was. We
put more effort into it than the people who made the show did.
I have many thoughts on Elfen Lied, most of which are complicated. The same way I would feel about like finding a Linkin Park shirt in my closet. The closet I'm in right now, and looking at a shirt of at this moment.
That's a woofed. Holy shit! That was a moment.
But not like
damn.
But not like a good Linkin Park shirt. Like, I mean, I guess after like their third or fourth album.
Right. Not a Hybrid Theory shirt.
No. Not Meteoria either. Like whatever came after that. Or like the Transformers
or it could be the
era.
Or I could go one better and say, what about the remix album with Jay-Z?
Oh,
that one I have mixed thoughts on. I think some of those remixes are decent enough.
I like the Executioners one on there.
I like the one they did of I can't remember what it was. Like one of the later ones I like. I think like the end of the album is decent-ish, and everything before that is like an edgy mishmash of everything I want to forget about my childhood.
It's dark new metal past.
Oh, the days when we didn't know any better, but now we watch anime, so we obviously have improved substantially.
Oh no, I have no excuse. I watched anime then too.
Oh, yeah, me too. Me too. That's.
I didn't.
I was discovering both anime and Linkin Park around the same time.
Then again, one could argue, that you never had a choice in the master, whereas I knew, and you were raised in the darkness. I've just been merely molded by it.
True, but like, I think actually at the time I was excited about Shadow the Hedgehog too. So in hindsight, there's a lot of things on.
A lot of regrets.
I think I actually made an AMV once, back when AMVs were a thing, where I mixed Shadow the Hedgehog, Elfen Lied, and I think maybe like Riku from Kingdom Hearts to finish the trifecta of ridiculousness with one of the remixes from that Linkin Park album. And
you didn't. Oh my god!
I'm not even joking.
Jesus Christ! I felt like I just found out that you've written a Necronomicon.
This is why I'm grateful that that YouTube channel got shut down years ago by Studio Ghibli. Yeah. I was very happy about that. Ghibli killed that one and nipped that one in the bud. I'm like, okay, no one will ever know unless I, talked about it on a podcast or something. That'd be wild.
Oh God. All right, so we're going to close out by actually covering our Patron questions here. Okay. We have 4 of them, as a matter of fact. Now, we may have already covered some of this previously, but I'll say them anyway, and if we have covered them earlier on in this discussion, we'll mention that, of course. The first one comes from, and I'm going to mispronounce this one, because unlike with your name, Anthony, I didn't actually write this one down phonetically, so here goes. Wushan Swibian? Oh, no, I cocks it. Bollocks. Oh, well. Try and carry on. We're walking. How did your view of the characters in Given change during the first season? We'll start with Anthony.
Okay, I think the characters didn't change a whole lot until the last act of the last 3 episodes. I think a lot of the characters are pretty static. The big exception is actually Ritsuka, who I think whose development I think is the most apparent. Whereas I feel like the rest of the bandmates kind of stick in the same mold until, their character arcs start to shift a little bit after the band gets together, essentially. I don't think Mafuyu really develops until, I mentioned it a lot before, until the last third. I think that's the show's detriment, but I think when he does develop, it's quite nice. It's quite good. I just wish I saw more of that earlier.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. Doc, how about you?
Oh, this is an interesting question, because I think we got asked this at least once, if not twice, throughout the show's run. Maybe it was about a specific character, right? How does your view of so-and-so changed up to this point? And, when we were talking about that, there was always more of the show to come, right? Always more of the unhatched egg of potential. But now we kind of have the whole thing laid out before us. And, I mean, in some of the characters, my view of them improved over time, Mafuyu being, like, the foremost among them. As I said, I was very worried in episode 1 that we are going to get a sort of yaoi trope issue, a relationship of, you got the Uenoyama, the big, strong, dominant type, and then the quiet, wafy boy, and, tropes ensue from there. Yeah. But, like, Mafuyu ended up being a lot more than that.
In fact, I would argue, at the end of the show's run, it's Mafuyu now who is actually leading the charge. Like, prior to the relationship coalescing, like prior to the concert even, like so many scenes where Uenoyama like talking technical stuff, music stuff, like this is a amp pedal, this is an amp, these are the strings, blah blah blah, etc. etc. He was leading him along, but then in terms of like actual relationship dynamics, like going somewhere on a date, for example, going to the beach, do you want to hold my hand, etc. When it shifts to that in the show's second half, quote unquote, even though it's the last like quarter really, it changes. It becomes him now teaching him things and educating him, not on the same subject matter, but certainly in the same fashion.
Yeah, it does kind of a role reversal in some interesting ways.
Yeah, completely.
With their relationship. And yeah, I think for all 4 of the band members, there ended up being kind of more to them than originally I thought, especially the older 2, Haruki and Akihiko. I was surprised they got as much focus as they did, but it was a welcome focus. And then some of the characters, my view of them, I was sort of hoping that more would happen until the very end, and then it kind of didn't. Mainly the ladies.
Yeah.
They were ill-used, I thought, in the show. Yayoi in particular, I thought there was potential to do interesting things with, and Shadan has kind of waxed lyrical about this on previous episodes. But yeah, kind of my opinion of them slowly went down as we ran out of show and the show ended. There was wasted potential there, but perhaps we'll get a second season or something, and they'll come into play more.
Yeah, they kind of vanished.
Certainly got the movie ahead.
They kind of vanished after a certain plot point. I think one character who I think got a lot of development, which I like, was the one of Mafuyu's friend, Mafuyu Yuki's friend, who like starts crying by the end of the series before he comes in as this antagonistic character, and then come the end he's like crying after the band performance because he's so happy. I think that's like
Hiragi, right?
I think Hiragi.
Yep, that would be Hiragi. Yeah. Yeah, apart from the complaint I had of him, like he was good regardless, like apart from that one particular moment that I had issues with.
I think he was the character I thought developed the most, honestly, in terms of the most apparent, consistent. If you take a ratio for screen time to development time, I think he was most drastic development.
He was the most efficient.
Yeah. Not a single second wasted with him. I loved it.
Yeah. I am still of the opinion that I wish Kasai got more to do. My criticism of why is she not just simply a newspaper is half joke and half truth, and it still stands.
Yeah, his sister is another character.
Well,
too.
that was that was Yayoi. Kasai is the
oh my god,
is
the classmate.
Kasai is the lady who told Uenoyama of the past of Mafuyu.
Oh, there we go. That's how little of an impression they all left on me, I think.
Yes,
well, there
exactly.
you go. That speaks volumes in of itself, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know?
I remember taking a note when I started taking notes when I first started watching the show, and then one of the notes was, the sister is so cool. I love her. And then she never did anything, and that was kind of sad.
Yeah.
I know. She was great.
God.
She was a really cool person. Like, of maybe, well, that would be a bold statement to say of anyone in the show, but she's definitely feels like one of the best hangs of the cast.
She's got she's got the same authenticity of like the banter and like the quips I mentioned before and the personality, but that is all she has.
I would hang out with her. She's pretty cool. Although I would also hang out with at that coffee shop and drink all that coffee, so that's a factor too.
Can I just say, you were saying about food porn before, by the way, in other shows.
Uh-huh.
Like, I have had a real hankering for Korean barbecue and giant flagons of beer. I've not seen beer done in anime that well in such a long time, and it makes me want to have one.
No, that was some of the best beer I've ever seen in anime. By far, because most often it's like just foam and like yellow. It's never done like, not never done. It's rarely done realistically, and I think that's a factor too. Anyway, so yeah, sorry.
Also, they got it right by having it be in steins with handles. Like, that is the optimal way to drink beer, as far as I am concerned.
Is there any other way?
Some patrons are listening to this, I'm sure. Request Shadon cover Bartender the anime. I feel like he would really get into that.
Oh my god, I'm gonna be an insufferable snob during that.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
What a weird.
That's the one where they mix drinks and they solve like everyone's problems.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Totally.
So it's Valhalla the anime.
So kind of, right? I mean,
not exactly.
It's a pretty glacially paced thing, but just I love that it exists because it's directed by Yasuhiro Imagawa, who is like a director of big actiony super robot things like Shin Mazinger Z and Giant Robo and Tetsujin 28, and then he'd made Bartender, which is weird.
Something smaller scale, something more restrained.
Yeah, nice small. No, yeah, you're gonna watch it. You're not maybe watching it. You are watching it.
I'm under marching orders here, Christ. Fair enough then, I'll put that on my to-do list.
Yeah, cool.
But just to answer from my own perspective, Wushan, I think that for me, like, I came to appreciate all the characters even more and more, just in the fact that, like I said with that scene with Haruki's smoke break, like, a lot of their experiences felt relevant to me as time went on. Like, I've dealt, for example, speaking personally here, with suicidal ideation, both in terms of how I felt and in terms of people I know who have suffered from the latter. And while, of course, I think that the suicide elements could have been fleshed out a little bit more, and I don't say that lightly, by the way, I don't mean to make like light of, we needed more of this stuff in there. You don't put stuff in that like ham-handedly. But I do still think that even though like Matthew's character didn't really change as quickly as it otherwise should have done, or rather wasn't paced as well as you say, Anne, I think that his overall personality in the first half of the show, which again is really the first like 3 quarters, does feel like a reasonable response to like the traumatic like of trauma, like, of losing someone close to you in that way, especially when, as you've also said, like the parents are so absent, the friends and like and family that you need for it are so distant.
Oh yeah, I agree. I do think that withdrawn element was done well. I wish they did more before that. I wish they did more before you realized that. But I do like how they showed him being so isolated.
Yeah. And to also follow up what you said, though, is something I agree with. I do think that it would have been nice if we had just one or two small moments where the old Matthew pokes out just for a moment. And maybe it was something like that people would notice or something that they wouldn't.
Exactly. Because I think with trauma all the time, they go for like the extreme 180 personality change, and they don't really show. It's more of a back, like pain and trauma. It's a back and forth train. It's not just,
Yeah.
the bounce.
You have good days and you have bad days, definitely.
Not a linear journey.
No, exactly. That's what I was looking for. That says it better than I could. Yeah, right there.
Just to look, I don't think we got sidetracked is not the right word, but we moved on from the suicide stuff that I think you were going to bring up, Shadon, earlier, and just to put a bow on that, and go listen to the episode 8 reaction stuff we did for our fuller thoughts on that. But like, I agree with what you said, Shady. Like, you're not necessarily saying, "Oh, I need more suicide. We need more tragedy porn or whatever."
Oh God, no!
But like,
no, please.
if you as a show and as a writer are going to do it, you're going to stick your neck out and introduce these elements. You sort of have a responsibility in some ways to do them well if you don't want to take the criticism. And there was that stuff at the end of episode 8, I thought kind of trivialized suicide in some ways, in terms of like how Yuki's rationale was related to us, the audience, that I thought was a little bit in poor taste. But luckily they didn't really dwell on that too much after that.
We got enough initial context after that helped. But I mean, like, I suppose I can ask the ultimate, like, what if question, which is, can you, in theory, jettison the entire Yuki suicide plotline and just have it simply be they broke up or he left the city and left Matthew's life entirely but is still alive? Can you do that without substantially changing the foundation of what Given is built on?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
You make it a breakup story and not a dealing with trauma and pain. Like, someone's got to die. Someone has to die in that situation. It's rough because I'll go from a more personal standpoint in this one. Very often, death is used as an easy way to resolve these kinds of plots, but since there's so many characters who are queer in the story, it's not the same thing as the kill your gays trope, where, okay, you have 2 gay characters and one's dead now, bye. You're not left on that note. You're left with, there's a bunch of them. Some people die, some people don't. Life goes on, which I think is important. And in my opinion, if you had him live, you could always just go, "Oh, you're feeling lonely? Well, why don't you just give him a call then?" Which doesn't have the same impact.
Yeah, that's true. Because there's always the open possibility of seeing him again or hearing from him again in that case. Whereas there's a finality to it. Yeah. No, you're right. I suppose in that case then, that I think this ties back to my complaint with Hiragi's involvement, in that there's something about the way in which it's portrayed as a fourth law breaker to us that makes it feel very authoritative to me, which it shouldn't be, because it is his incomplete perspective. And this is also why I say that I think that it would have functioned better as a thing that he says to Uenoyama. Like, Uenoyama could approach, say, "I know you knew Matthew back in the day, can you give me some more info?" And that's what you get. But anyway, that's ground we've covered already, so we'll move on to our next question. We have a couple now coming from Kate Rose here, so I'll start with this. Kate. And this actually, funnily enough, is perfectly like a follow-on from what we've just been discussing, which goes thusly. With the actual amount of time that passed in the anime, is it plausible for Matthew to heal from Yuki's death and simultaneously fall for Uenoyama? Before we answer this, I think we should just probably try and get a common ground on the amount of time in question, so we're all working from the same page here. Because by my understanding, Yuki passed in the winter of the year prior, and then now heading into summer. So that is 6 months, would you argue?
I thought it was a little longer than that, honestly, because I thought it was like a year.
A full year?
Since Yuki's death. I thought I recall hearing that, but I could be misremembering it. But,
well, let's play it on the safe side and go with a year then.
It feels like...
because like they hadn't seen... Because, I'm sorry, I cut you off there, sorry.
No, I was just thinking, I'm trying to... So is the Japanese school year on the same, like, it's different, right? Like, does fall still begin the new school year?
No, I think it starts with
Is it spring? Okay, because the way that they talk about Yuki and Mafuyu, they reference it being in middle school, right? But they're first years in high school right now. Am I correct in that, or am I wrong about that?
I think so. So it was a boyfriend in middle school, and then it was a rumor that went around. If it had happened that year, they would have been like. And plus, I'm thinking going off of also like, because it was apparently a while since he had talked to his old friend, since Mafuyu talked to his old friend. So I'm assuming it was more than just a few months.
Right.
Like it's like some time had passed.
Yeah, and you're right about that.
Yeah, and plus, like with self-destructive behavior like that, sometimes, like with depression, with suicidal thoughts, you're not gonna get away from that even after a year. It could take decades to recover from
if
that.
anything, one might argue that it's worse the longer it goes on, because you self-reinforce. You don't have anyone offering you the counter-narratives that Uenoyama does, like through his affection to Mafuyu, that is. So you internalize it more.
Yeah.
I mean, the impression I get, especially from the beach walk, is that Mafuyu has never really had a chance to get his feelings out there, even just in like small conversations or small doses, even just to cry to someone, like, you know. And so in some way that makes it feel worse, I suppose. So I'll offer my answers to this question now then, which is, I'm going to say that there's two answers to this, actually. And I think that the answer is that I don't think he's healed from Yuki's death right there and then. I think that that's going to be ongoing. Because we've seen, as Doc said, a synthesis of old Mafuyu, who pre-Yuki's death, and the one that lived post then, who was very withdrawn. So I think that is, in some way I could answer, well, he's never going to heal, and that seems like a cop-out, but I think that more it's a case that he's on the way there, but it hasn't happened yet. But as for falling for Enoyama, I think so. I think that's definitely true. And indeed, part of that might be because Uenoyama and Yuki share certain similarities, not least of which being their musical proficiency.
I think I agree there. I think going off of my understanding of how long the series takes place, well, here's the thing also, love and romance doesn't have to be like, you don't have to move on from the last person you're with before falling in love with someone else. You can fall in love with someone else while in a relationship with someone else, like, to be blunt about it.
And that in turn, like, just from a writing perspective, can make for good drama. Like, if you're being very utilitarian about it, that's a good thing for a writer to do.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think there's nothing, and they don't go extremely in one direction or the other anyway. They just start dating by the end of the series. They're not like exchanging wedding rings here. I'm not referencing anything by that one at all.
No.
Which I will also add.
Put your thoughts on ice for a moment then.
No, I will on what specifically?
Exactly. Well played.
No, but on that note, another show that deals with trauma and recovering from it is Yuri on Ice.
Hey.
Oh my god, I'm never playing poker against you, Ant.
I have moments. No, but like that, I was going to use that as a comparison because that show does deal with recovering from trauma very well, but the trauma is personal, and that has a very similar time span. In fact, it may even have a longer time span with more detail being put into self-care and overcoming your own pain, with more visually obvious forms of self-destructive behavior. I do think, though, with shows that deal with trauma, you're never going to get it right because there is no right. There is no one way to deal with trauma. There is no one timetable by which it's appropriate to say, okay, you're good, you can move on now, because that's not how life works.
No, that's a very good point.
That's well put, and was going to kind of be the way I led into my answer, that a lot of it's not so clean in real life, right? Like you have to resolve your issues in box number 1 before you move on to box number 2. It's often not the way of it, and I think despite the timetable being whatever it is, like the fact that Mafuyu is still getting over Yuki when he falls for Uenoyama and begins to date him. Like, it resonated with me in personal trauma that I've had to deal with. And a lot of times, I mean, this is like our only kind of gauge that we have to judge things by. And like I've talked about when we discussed Angel's Egg at length, that when my wife and I lost our first child through it was a stillbirth, like it was incredibly devastating, as you can imagine. And one of the things that in the long term helped us heal from it was trying again and having a successful pregnancy and birth and having a child, caring and nurturing our first daughter helped us deal with losing our previous child. And, you know, in a similar kind of way, it's not directly analogous or anything, but, you know, Mafuyu giving and receiving love and affection from Uenoyama is a thing that helps him in taking steps to resolve his kind of inner conflict and his trauma with Yuki.
Yeah, yeah. First off, that's rough. I can't find no for that, but no, yeah.
Thank you.
That gets it. I'm so sorry. I can't find words for that. I'm sorry.
No. It's hey. I mean, your sentiment is what matters, and it is appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. But yeah, no. Yeah, I think you hit it there on the head, right there. Yeah, I have nothing to add there. I'm sorry.
I think your mileage is going to vary on how you feel, and there's no right or wrong answer to the question that's been said there. We all bring our own like experiences. Like media is not something that we consume in a vacuum, where we simply process it the same way every single time under the same set of rules and criteria and whatnot. So
speak for yourself. I have media processing.
I do, damn it. That's why I'm doing the podcast. Anyway, we'll move on to the next question. This is actually specifically for you, Anthony, and not for myself or Doc.
Oh, cool.
So I'm going to now do the second attempt at pronouncing your name correctly. For Mr. Gramulia,
there you go.
What do you...
Switch.
Yeah,
2 out of 2.
There you go.
What do you think was the best and worst moment of the show in regards to realistically representing LGBT relationships between the characters? Assuming, of course, you felt they did so at all.
Okay. You're probably gonna think this is ridiculous, but the one thing that I think they did really realistically was how everyone in that group is gay, and none of them know it.
Wow.
That is, that is one of the most realistic things I've seen in anything.
Wow.
It's like freaking magnets.
They're standard users.
It's magnets inside of like a dumb like freaking like felt sock. It's like it doesn't matter where they are. They find each other.
That's incredible.
They find each other and they're drawn to each other. And the whole
the
time,
inner power draws you together.
No idea. They have no idea. Just casually hanging out. Just like, oh hey, what's up? Oh hey, what's I do find it unrealistic though. On that note, that they're all attracted to each other. That I find unrealistic because that doesn't happen like in life. You don't happen to have 4 all, let's be quite honest about it, well-illustrated, well-designed characters, all in the same space, who all are each other's type. That just doesn't happen in any form, but that's besides the point. Most of the portrayal is pretty realistic. I think it's pretty, it's straightforward. There's no, I don't think there's anything too unrealistic about the portrayal. I think there's problematic elements, like I mentioned before, but realism isn't a factor. It's more of a storytelling perspective. But realism, they're pretty on par. Even that bit that probably everyone else thought was the most unrealistic part. Like, how are they all gay and hanging out with each other? That sounds realistic. I buy that. I get that.
Yeah. That's excellent. The next question we have, this is for all of us. What event or moment would you most want to see in the upcoming movie? Anthony, I'm going to let you answer this one first.
Me? I want to see. This is a random thing to want. I really want to see what happens with the boyfriend character.
Yes.
Ugetsu. There we go.
The Aperture Science test subject.
Because that one, I was like the whole time. I'm like, where is this guy going? Like, I got abusive, creepy vibes from him.
Totally.
I got like vibes from him. Like, I don't like this guy, but they never really went to his culminated with his character. So knowing there's a movie, I'm like, he's gonna be, because they never resolved that subplot. They resolved the other subplots in the show, but they never really resolved that love triangle subplot, and it didn't seem like a healthy relationship to me. So I really want to see them expand that. And I figured that by the end of the show, it's like, oh, they're holding out on that. They're gonna expand that next season if they get one. But when knowing there's a movie, that tells me right there they're gonna deal with that.
Yeah. Or maybe it's just that Ugetsu can't go outside because he explodes under sunlight.
Well, he's a vampire, obviously. So I mean,
yeah,
totally.
Yeah, clearly. I'm going to actually follow up next because your point there actually leads on to something I'd like to see, and funnily enough, Ugetsu gets involved in this as a pressure point, which is that we've had now Mafuyu and Uenoyama in prime focus throughout the show's run, and Haruki and Akihiko's own burgeoning, like, will they, won't they, like, understanding of each other has now sort of come forward, because there was, of course, that scene with them on the stairs. So let them be the focus. Let's have the movie be about them primarily, and them, coming together. And then with Ugetsu, as I say, as the pressure point, like the fulcrum around which part of that revolves, because Akihiko, of course, whether or not he is, like, in a relationship, or it's just friends with benefits, or he's just simply living there, whatever, like, framework they live under, that's still something that would be considered. I mean, even if it's completely, like, platonic, like, I can see, for example, from a writing perspective, Haruki, like, learning of that history between them and being jealous or worried or, like, not believing the truth of it, that, no, we were a thing, but we're not anymore. There's plenty of potential to be mined from this. And they're, like, for the main characters, it's their two, like, arcs that, and their two, like, coming together that is not yet resolved. So I want to see them get the prime focus next.
I'm down for that. That kind of reminds me of the Yuri on Ice movie, where they're going to be talking about a totally different character. I should stop bringing up Yuri on Ice. That should be a... I should...
No,
should be like a,
not at all.
a marker on my neck whenever I bring it up.
Yeah.
It's like a dog electric collar. Sorry about that.
Okay, for me, I'm going to approach this from things that I don't want to see in the movie. Because you guys have hit on a couple of things that I would really like to see, actually, but the first one that I'm going to talk about is not my real answer. It's I pray to God it's not going to happen, because this is some Darkest Timeline shit, but Shadon, much earlier in the discussion, when you were talking about the parents. God, I can't stop myself. Why did I think of this? Okay.
Oh, so, Lord, he coming.
Okay,
Uenoyama. We've seen Uenoyama's dad. We've seen Mafuyu's mom.
Okay.
No! Right, you can stop there. No. Stop there.
No, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what the next step is here.
Well, Mafuyu has... his mom has... Mrs. Sato has probably cut bait with the husband who got sent off to jail.
Okay.
So, in the Darkest Timeline, now that Uenoyama and Mafuyu are dating, suddenly they're stepbrothers!
I hate you so fucking much right now. You have no fucking clue. My hatred burns brighter than 1,000 suns, you prick! I'm not going to be able to wash that out with an entire tank of brain bleach.
Do
this
it.
Is prime Dojin material. Let me tell you. No, okay. So that...
If that book ever gets written, I'm throwing it at you.
Oh, and then they make a light novel together where the little sister... Oh, God, no.
Yes.
This is absolute trash, and I love it. I'm all for this.
Okay, no, but in all seriousness, a thing that I think... is a trope that I hope that doesn't happen, like a story beat that I feel like could happen that I don't want to happen, is sort of artificially generated drama between our two leads that sort of dials back the character development that they had at the end of the show, so that they have to reclimb the treadmill to get back to where they were. I want to see them deal with an obstacle that can happen to people that are in a relationship, but I would like to see it done in the form of progression rather than something that feels like character regression, because I feel like that so often happens when in tons of anime in particular, like when you're coming back to completed stories. What do we do with these characters that we have to have on screen because these are what people are paying to see? We have to fill screen time with them doing something. Well, let's just kind of erase character development so they can walk the same path again. Don't do that.
Yeah, the show already has enough problems with character development going forward. Let's not take steps backwards either. I agree with that entirely.
Yeah, I'm in agreement as well, because to me, like, just if you look at it simply as like character progression, if you dial them back only to put them where they started, then to me, what's the point in the actual film?
Oh yeah,
like, well, why bother unless it's like brought up for continuity's sake later? It's just well, okay, yes, yes, there is that. No ethical consumption under capitalism, blah 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 blah. Okay, we have one final question. Okay. I don't know if you've listened to these, Anthony. If you've not, myself and Dot, we can answer those. This is again from Kate Rose. Mm-hmm. There were two versions of the main song that Matthew sings in Given in episode 9. Mm-hmm. One was in the drama CD, and the other was the one from the anime itself. Could you listen to both versions, look over the lyrics, and comment on which you think fits the show best? I'm going to start on this one.
Yeah, this is yours. That's my territory. You guys got this one.
Okay. I've not actually read the lyrics of this. I've not, unfortunately, had the opportunity to do so, but I have listened to both versions. Now, the irony is that for a band just starting out, the one that comes from the drama CD sounds very much like what I'd expect to hear, quality-wise, from an LP. Mm-hmm. Like the very first LP one band puts out. And the one that comes from the anime is just superior in practically every way that's measurable. Like, Matthew is like actually singing with like the full emotion he has, which gives it real weight. Even the guitars are more like energetic, like during that moment, during the main chorus. So for me, like, I can understand, like, you know, maybe listening to the drama CD one in a vacuum, but at the same time, the song like is so intrinsically tied to the show's pivotal moment that I don't think you could listen to it in a vacuum at all. You'd always think back, this just isn't quite the same as what it was, like, you know, in the scene where they actually play. And I'm just talking in terms of like how good it sounds. So no, in my opinion, the anime one is superior in every way that's demonstrable. Apart from being slightly shorter, but, well, that's neither here nor there, really.
So my take on it is I'm of two minds. I think musically, I'm with you, Shadon. Like, the performance in the anime, like, just the sound of it is incredible. And it's vastly superior, as you say, to the version in the drama CD. I would not want that replaced with the other thing. But, like, lyrically, I actually prefer the drama CD one. It feels... and now, granted, like, I think Wushin was saying that the CrunchyRoll lyrics... the translation that they provided was... Oh, no, that's not the CrunchyRoll lyrics. They're different from the CrunchyRoll lyrics. But at any rate... The one in the anime feels like a sort of generic love song that you could write for any couple, whereas the drama CD version feels like something that Mafuyu would have written about his life. Like, it feels a lot more specific to him and his relationship. So I like the lyrics to that one better.
Okay,
fair enough.
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
And I might want to add that having not heard any of these songs, my commentary right now might be completely useless, but I think in context it makes more sense for it to sound rougher and more raw, considering what it is. But again, I have to actually listen to the second version. I really thought the anime version was something. So that right there is, I want to see if it's on Spotify and then be disappointed when it's not.
as it happens, Anthony, I think we have both versions linked to us, one of which is on SoundCloud and one of which is on YouTube. So after the cast, you and myself and Doc will set you up with those.
Please. I would love to hear
but otherwise, that concludes all of our Patreon questions. So to Wushan and to Kate Rose, thank you both very much for offering those final questions on Given, and saying final anything about Given makes me feel a bit sad right now. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. If you are listening to this and have enjoyed our discussion here and want to actually be involved more closely with shows that we cover going forward week on week on Second Stream, please feel free to consider becoming a patron for as little as $2 a month. It'll get you Discord access. Higher tiers will also grant you access to exclusive content, such as actually be able to catch up, or rather catch our ongoing commentaries as they come out week on week rather than a couple of weeks behind, as well as other exclusive shows like the one I did about Akiken, which... and on top of that, if you subscribe to the highest tier, the $5 one, you'll be able to request shows for us to cover, for which Akiken was requested. I'm currently in the process of scripting and recording a discussion on Tokyo Godfathers. Doc, I believe you're covering Kino's Journey?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so we'll be having more of those. Indeed, if you want me to cover Bartender the Anime, as Anthony suggested, that's certainly one way of doing it. But yeah, do feel free to consider joining for a Patreon for as little as $2 a month. Anyway, that otherwise concludes our discussion on Given, both the series and our overall thoughts as a whole. It's just to quickly sum up from my perspective, I've really enjoyed the show. It's not without its faults, but I think there's plenty to like here, and I think that it's certainly an important show. But as Anthony said, doesn't mean it can't be better. Doesn't mean there are, that we have to settle for it. We should, shows that are good as this and are successful as, there's nothing wrong with demanding more.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. And speaking of which, Anthony, I just wanted to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come join us.
It was my pleasure.
Your insight has been incredibly invaluable, and on top of that, it's been a real delight having you here on the podcast, for us to say. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for taking the time to come join us. I really appreciate it.
That was my pleasure. I probably wouldn't have seen Given otherwise, and I feel like I definitely saw something that was very much worth my time, I think. So thank you. Thank you for asking me to watch it, and thank you for asking me on. I really appreciate it. Yeah, words. How do I use them?
Well, I'm still trying myself. I haven't yet figured that out.
Yeah. Well, it's a problem for me because I have to be paid to write. So for me, it's the word. I don't even know what words are.
Coin operated.
So I think I know I speak for Shadon, and I'm sure all of our audience when I say, we hope this is not the last time that we have you on our podcast, Anthony. It really has been. Yes. It really has been great. It's been a really enjoyment.
Tell me a show, I'll watch it whenever. As long as I have the time to record, I'm down. I enjoyed this quite a lot, quite honestly. I enjoyed this hour-long podcast. You have to work on.
Yeah, right.
Right. It's just compressed time. It's fine. I'm going to speed everyone's voices up so we all sound really squeaky when we fit into the hour.
I always wanted to be a chipmunk in Alvin and the Chipmunks. That sounds wonderful.
I'm being Alvin. I'm just putting that out there right now. Anyway, I'm being the cool one. Okay. Otherwise, wherever you may be listening from, if you're listening to it on iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, if you would be so kind, it would be really appreciative if you take time out to just, drop us a subscribe, drop us a like, drop us some feedback if you have any. All of that really helps for our discoverability, and we really appreciate when people do that, even if you're not a patron.
Really quickly.
Just
want to give Anthony one more time to plug where folks can find his writing and what he's working on.
Okay,
indeed.
I'm glad you asked that. I am usually active on Twitter. My account will probably be linked in some description here, but it's AGRAMUGLIA Twitter. That's my Twitter handle. If you want to spell that out. I frequently write for CBR. Usually I have something coming out that day, typically, if not more than one. On occasion, I write for the Mary Sue, Anime Feminist, though those come out more slowly because those are a much more in-detail edit and writing process. I contribute to those sites. I've contributed to Medium. My Medium account has some other stuff that they wouldn't let me. I didn't pitch to other websites because I didn't feel they'd want that. No, just general. If you want to follow me on Twitter. That's where you'll find most updates on big projects I'm working on. Anyway.
Indeed, definitely check out Anthony's Twitter. There's plenty of good stuff to be found there. All right then. Well, from myself, from Doc, and Doc, of course, thank you as always for doing this with me. It's one of the highlights of my week.
The pleasure is mine.
And of course to you, Anthony, as well, for taking the time today to offer such great commentary and great wit as well.
Oh, my pleasure.
This has been Warui Deshou. We've been covering Given. We will definitely be back to cover the movie in 2020.
Yes.
We should be back next week with a new series, which we've not yet decided on. We need to finalise the voting process.
Well, I don't think it's going to start next week.
Oh, even...
I think we get another week off of second stream. Vinland Saga. Cool. Vinland Saga marches on, but I don't think the new shows will begin until later in October.
I think it starts start of October into I think My Hero Academia is one of the later ones on the 12th. I think that's one of the later ones this season to start up. I think, but I could be mistaken. I've been trying to pitch articles about that, and they're like, "Yeah, let's wait to see what's popular." I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, basically, folks, I think my sense of time, space, and all that has just been completely fallen out of my backside. So ignore everything I just said. We'll let you know, of course, what we're covering next and when it'll be coming on. But until that time, of course, as always, as we say here on Warui Deshou, embrace each other, everyone, to the ends of the universe, and a very good night.
Wow. Good night.
Night.